this, brother.
All right, it's the last episode of our 1989 season of Observe This. Draven is with me on Christmas Eve. You know, you work in a field where you have to talk to people from tons of different religions. Like, what do you do? Are you a Merry Christmas guy or are you a Happy Holidays guy? How do you manage that?
Well, again, because I work in the field that I work in, you're always supposed to meet everybody where they're at, right? That's kind of like
Right.
the golden rule. So when it comes to that, it's always happy holidays.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just to be respectful. But in my own personal life, I always say Merry Christmas
Right.
because, we have to, I mean, it is what it is. It's a cultural thing too, Although I heard there was a lot of people trolling this year and saying Happy Christmas for whatever reason, it's becoming a thing. But so it's when I'm working with clients, Dutch patients, it's always Happy Holidays, And then as you build rapport, maybe they'll be cool with you saying Merry Christmas. It all depends.
Right.
So, but
Yeah, because you have some people who will try to name every holiday that they know, and it kind of comes off a little goofy to me. And that's why I kind of like Happy Holidays, because it shows that you're being respectful, but you're also not trying to be cool and name off all of these things that you have no idea about.
Right.
So I do like Happy Holidays. Anyways, Merry Christmas to Draven. And happy holidays to everyone. We are recording this on Christmas Eve on the live stream. On the audio side, this will probably be up on Christmas morning. So those of you who, need a little audio after a crazy Christmas Eve, it should be there for you. And we're going to cover November and December of 1989 WCW and WWF through the lens of Dave's Wrestling Observers. And this is going to be the last episode of 1989, and we're going to start covering 1984 sometime next year, which will be a little different because the way that they do television and the way that they do tentpole shows is way different than they did in 1989. We were kind of discussing off air how many shows were in the months of November and December for both companies. And you even had like a half of a show with a no holds barred cage match at the same time. So there was tons of stuff for us to go through in this month, but we will, let's start off with some of the news. You know what? I don't even have an Observe This because Dave was super serious for these last 2 months of the year. He didn't have a lot of.
Did you notice he was very? I don't know. Maybe it was just me. He was very optimistic about the NWA, right? I mean, I don't know, especially towards the end there. He was kind of rooting for them. Because obviously the whole year, the whole story of 1989 was how much of a fuck up they were, right? I mean, they couldn't get their act together, even though the booking was good, the matches were great, some of the greatest matches in history. The Steamboat Flair trifecta, but they just couldn't put the pieces together. And Dave's entire thing was like just kind of almost yelling at them time and time again. But towards the end, even though he wasn't a particular fan of Halloween Havoc, and a lot of his fan base wasn't either, which was interesting to me because I've always liked that show. I don't know why. I mean, but it was kind of a boring show. We covered it in last month's edition, but after that, it seems like the build. You know what it was? It was the I Quit match that really got Dave excited again. And then after that, he was just like, "Hey, there's the future's not bright, but there is some light there in their future." So that's the vibe that I caught over the last couple of months of him covering the NWA.
Well, what's interesting about that is the last couple of issues of the year were about TBS or Turner wanting to kind of age Flair out because they see Lex Luger and Sting as the new wave, but they also see Ric Flair as more of an obstacle to their success. And Dave breaks down, and we'll talk about that in a second, but Dave breaks down why Flair is an obstacle and how Sting and Luger will not be able to fill his shoes at their current level. So that was like really interesting to read back. And it was all based on this Future Shock tournament, which is all about creating the next wave for WCW. So I did have some notes from the previous episode that we were talking about WWF going to London. And by the way, I want to Pro Wrestling Joker wanted to wish us a Merry Christmas. Great dude. He and I and Brian Alvarez are in like a predictions contest for 2025 when it comes to WWE. I'm winning, by the way. We did the last 2 shows in 2024. I'm kicking their butts, so that it'll keep happening. It'll keep happening. But shout out to you, Pro Wrestling Joker. It was really good to get to know him a little bit this year. So I will also see him at WrestleMania in Vegas. Okay.
Oh, so that's official. That's news to me that you're going.
I'm at least going for
that's right. Yes, you skip WrestleMania.
Well, if I can get in as media, I'll go to night 1 of WrestleMania. I will do a lot of the side stuff like Tony Leaders throwing the convention stuff. But if I cannot get in as media, I don't know about forking over, $400 to get into that show. Just watch it back at the crib or something.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. So Dazza left us some comments on our last show about the London shows, because we were kind of wondering how those were, if they're on TV and all that stuff. So Dazza said there were 2 London shows that were Sky specials. And well, actually there was one, but then it sold so many tickets that they added a second one for the same week in Birmingham. And he said there was indeed a match with British wrestlers on the show, as there was a dark match, a 6-man with Dale Wolf, Al Perez, and Tim Horner against Skull Murphy, Rollerball Rocco, and Fit Finley. He says he doesn't think there's any footage of that match anywhere. And he said that the reactions to the British wrestlers was really big because all 3 were big names on World of Sport, which had only been off the air for less than a year. And then he said the story about not being able to have non-Commonwealth wrestlers is odd because, as well as Savage and Hogan, the show featured Honky Tonk Man and Hacksaw and Brooklyn Brawler versus Paul Roma. And I think all of those guys are American. And he said, that said, WWF brought a bunch of Canadian wrestlers for the show, so maybe there's something to it. The Birmingham show also had UK wrestlers. And I'm told by someone who was there that Rollerball got one of the biggest pops of the night. Brett was also super over. And Hogan and Duggan versus Savage and Bravo was the main event of the Birmingham show. So great memory from Dazza, because that's a long time ago.
That was a very long time ago. Yeah. I remember when they first, that was one of their first European tours. And there was a compilation tape. I don't know if it was a super tape or whatever. WWF's hottest matches. They always used to come out with these wacky compilation tapes. They had this, I think it was from Paris. It was from France, where they had this pretty cool entryway where they were coming out of like this glass tunnel, and they actually had fireworks. I wouldn't say pyro; it was more like fireworks display. And it was cool. I remember as a kid watching that, I was like, "Damn, how come we don't get that here?" And it was pretty nice.
You like the pyro and ballyhoo?
Yes, which I'm gonna put over Starrcade when we get to it. I thought that was an amazing. I mean, from a technological perspective, the show was a big fuck up, and we'll get to that. but just from a visual production, I thought it was pretty cool. Just the entryway, it was very ahead of its time when you think about it.
Okay, we'll get to that. So, the way we're gonna do this is we're gonna go through all the news, and then we'll cover all of the shows just kind of in a row at the end of the show. So, the first news in November is Dave is sort of figuring out where WCW is going with the Funk stuff, and he believes that the I Quit match that is scheduled for the Clash of Champions is going to be Terry Funk's last match. Now, as is the case every time it was Terry Funk's last match, Dave would say, take that with a grain of salt because this dude retires all the time. But he does need a break. he did get through a really rough patch did great work. Also, I think maybe Funk was like on the I'm assuming he was on the record of this as saying like, he felt the need to actually maybe get on the juice a little bit for this run just because of, the spotlight of him and Flair.
Right.
And then his body was also beat up because he was wrestling a lot and he'd gotten injured in that run. So he was going to take time off after this match. So, and I guess if you're an Observer reader, you probably already knew Flair was going to win, but that's Dave's way of saying, yeah, Ric Flair's winning this match, by the way.
Right. Right.
What did you think of the idea of Buzz Sawyer replacing Terry Funk, though?
Well, at the time, I didn't really know Buzz Sawyer because obviously I was 8 years old. In hindsight, I mean, Buzz Sawyer was one of those guys that always had tons of potential, right? But he had a lot of issues, addiction issues, and just character. So he was always coming in and out of territories, burning bridges or whatnot. So it was a risk on their part to bring him in to quote unquote replace Terry Funk.
Yeah.
And so, but at the same time, who else was out there?
Yeah.
So you want a guy that has the no pun intended, buzz around them, to be able to keep up as much as possible with what Terry Funk was doing. So in a sense, they made the right move. But sure enough, I mean, he wouldn't last a year, I don't think, because he would be gone by the following year. But yeah, and then he would pass away a couple years later after that. So yeah, so Buzz Sawyer was one of those guys, man, that everybody always talked about ever since the match with Tommy Rich. That big bloodbath that they had in Atlanta. Everybody thought he was the guy, and it just never came to be. But here's shot number 135.
Yeah.
A lot of these wrestlers that we'll see through the years, they always get shot after shot after shot because there's so much potential behind them, and they always end up messing it up one way or another. And this is another example with Buzz Sawyer.
And it is rare also because if you are not on WWF television and you are not on WCW television, you can kind of come in as a new person, though getting someone from WWF would actually be more of a buzz. And this is like a really big part of the story of the end of 1989. And we'll get to the Tully Blanchard stuff in a bit. But the idea of, for WCW, how do we reinvent? Like, how do we bring in guys? Well, some way is to bring someone over from WWF. But if you can't, Buzz Sawyer hasn't been on national television in however long. So he kind of comes in a little fresh as well. All right. So Dave, early in November, he hears this story about Starrcade and what Starrcade's going to be. He's kind of surprised that they're leaning this route for Starrcade, the double Ironman tournaments for the tag and the singles. And he says, I think this is a really good idea for Japan or for a Clash of Champions. I'm not sure you can sell a pay-per-view without a grudge match headlining in the main event.
Yeah, that was always the idea back in the day when pay-per-view was in its infancy, right? You always have to have a world title match, And it's interesting because when WWF tried these like niche pay-per-views, these themed pay-per-views like the Survivor Series, or as Dave kept on calling Survivors, which was getting fucking annoying. Like, bro, it's called the Survivor Series. Just type it out. Once they felt that it wasn't drawing, what do? They put a world title match in there, right? Same thing with the King of the Ring. They tried King of the Ring with no world title match. It didn't work. Then they put a world title match. So back in the day, there was always this idea that themed pay-per-views wouldn't work without a world title match or a headlining match. So these tournaments were always kept to a minimum, So I could understand Dave's point of view here because we didn't have the data yet or the information that if you build a themed pay-per-view correctly, you don't really have to have a headline match. But traditionally, people are gonna pay for what they know they're gonna see. So that was his point, and he was correct.
Also, back-to-back pay-per-views with no world title match. And I asked him this recently, and I said, how come they didn't do Flair Funk I Quit at Halloween Havoc instead of that Thunderdome cage match? And he didn't really have a great answer, just more along the lines of they wanted to attempt something different. They had an experiment. Because, like, if you think about it, if Halloween Havoc was Flair Funk, that pay-per-view would be remembered very differently. But at the same time, Clash being free on television, that probably makes that match even more memorable because so many people, 5 or 6 million people versus 100,000 or whatever. So probably the right move. But I just thought that would be a kind of an interesting match to headline Halloween Havoc, was to do the I Quit match there.
I disagree with you somewhat, because I one of the things that I hate is when Triple H would say, "Well, I'm doing the 5 match thing because I want headline matches for the TV, and then the guys or the girls get more time on TV." And I'm thinking, no, you build equity on a match through how the investment of the people, right? So if people pay for a match like pay-per-view, you're gonna remember that match even more, right? Because your investment is deeper, so your brain is gonna remember what you're getting for your money even more. So this idea that, okay, I could have a match in front of 3 million people on a Monday Night Raw or a Clash, or I could have a match on pay-per-view in front of 250,000. More people are going to remember my match on TV because more people saw it. That's wrong, because the investment in watching it is less. Does that make sense?
That's why I don't like television matches on shows today. Like I'm not a fan of when you put a match on television, because you're telling me that in this 15-minute match, I'm going to see 4 minutes of picture-in-picture commercials, and I'm just going to fast forward through that because I don't want to see the picture-in-picture stuff. So, yeah, I'm not a fan of television wrestling as much, though there are some really good television wrestling matches today. We're kind of spoiled in that way.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'm with you. I would rather all of the matches be on pay-per-view, but I'm trying to get in the mindset of like 1989 and why they would put Flair Funk on the television show versus the pay-per-view. I thought it would have been awesome on the pay-per-view, but I kind of understand, especially back then, the way that they were doing things, why they would think that putting it on TV was better.
Yeah, because like I've been revisiting 2004, because I've been going on with the Observers, reading 2004 Observers, watching the television, and there's been a lot of like 1 hour matches that nobody talks about that were pretty good. I mean, there was Chris Benoit and Triple H wrestled for an hour on Raw, and nobody remembers that, unless we bring it up.
Yeah.
Obviously the Brock Lesnar Kurt Angle Iron Man match, that was a good match. Nobody really talks about it. If it would have been on pay-per-view, everybody would have remembered it, right?
Yeah.
So another more recent example is that Sheamus Gunther match. It was the Clash at the Castle. I mean, everybody remembers that match, but had it been on that SmackDown before Clash of the Castle, nobody would remember it. So yeah, so this idea, this correlation of like the more viewers, the more people are going to remember, that's a false positive, as they would say, right? It doesn't add up. So in this case, I think they really felt like the Thunderdome was going to draw the money.
Yeah.
So they had to put the
gimmick.
Thunderdome in. Yeah, the gimmick of the Thunderdome was going to be, in their mind, it was going to be bigger than any kind of like I Quit match between Flair and Funk. So whether we'll never know if that's a fact or not financially, but certainly from the way people remember it, it's not, because we remember the I Quit match more.
Yeah. So you were 100% right about Koko Beware when we talked about him getting fired last time. So he's back in early 90. He was in a fight with Jim Troy, who was the VP of Internal Affairs. And yeah, he resigned, but was still a consultant, and Koko would be back pretty soon thereafter.
You know what? What's kind of like this underlying theme with Koko's career? I'm going to say Koko Ware, because remember, they wouldn't put the letter B for a very long time. With Koko Ware, like, I think there was a lot of people that really, there was a lot of like racism against him and just discrimination, because he was tested a lot. Like he was tested a lot, and I think because he was a smaller guy, and it was a different era. For the younger kids that are watching now, they probably don't understand that. Or maybe they do, who knows? But it was a different era, and I think because it seemed like the guy was getting in a lot of fights during that time, and to his credit, he held his own for most of them. So here's another example, and yeah, I think he went to Puerto Rico for a little bit, when I caught up with the Observer, and then he came back. So good for him.
And they still brought him back at the rebirth of Saturday Night's Main Event the other day.
Yeah, he was there.
What'd you think about that show, by the way?
I like it. It was a show that was made for me, but it wasn't made for anyone else. I like that mixture of like great in-ring work, different in-ring work, which was pretty weird to see. But at the same time, there was no, as Pat Patterson would say, no Gaga.
Yeah.
And other than the main event, which I thought was a great tribute to Pat Patterson, because that was the Gaga that he was good at. But yeah, it was weird to me that there wasn't, because if Vince was booking that, he would have had some segment with the quote unquote legends getting laid out, by the bloodline or something, So yeah, I mean, it was very unusual, but I really liked it. But I knew it wasn't gonna connect. I knew it wasn't gonna connect.
In a vacuum, I thought it was like the most professional wrestling show I'd ever seen in my entire life. Like, yes, they moved through that show so gracefully and so smartly. But at the end of the show, my thought was, okay, like, what's the hook to come back next time? There wasn't one. Like, it was just like, oh, wrestling is back on NBC. We'll figure out when we're back next time. I thought that they were going to do like a big angle that would have connected in some way, but it didn't. They didn't do that. So, we'll see what they do for Royal Rumble.
Yeah, maybe they learn from it, and the next one in San Antonio is going to be a little more Vince McMahon like. It was funny to me because the irony of all this is that Saturday Night's Main Event show was very like Tony Khan-ish. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was that's a show that he would book for his audience.
Yeah, just the fast wrestling and moving from segment to segment to segment.
Unfortunately,
they wouldn't have done it as gracefully. There would have been some sound stuff not working, and
of course,
there would have been someone walking in the background on an interview.
Right, and he doesn't have the characters that are over like WWE does right now. So
yeah. No, but like that, it was like the best television wrestling show I think I'd ever watched, from the perspective of production to how smoothly they got in and out of segments to the broadcasting. Now, I thought Joe Tessitore was a little corny with his bow tie, but to see Jesse, like, it kind of hit a lot of different things, but it didn't have like that one thing that could have, like, if you had Rock on the show, that would have been the iconic thing that would have hooked everyone for the next time. So
I think now they're also in that mode where they have so many shows they have to promote as A shows, because they're going from show to show to show, because they had gone from the Survivor Series, and then 2 weeks later it was Saturday Night's Main Event, and then 3 weeks after that is the January 6th Raw.
Yeah, and that's the biggie for real. Like, that's the real big one,
right? And then is the next Saturday Night's Main Event, then it's the Royal Rumble. So I don't know. They seem like they haven't been able to come up for air. And I think when you're in that mode, you do what's easiest, right? Me and you have talked about when it comes to television production, and you're in this treadmill that just never ends. You have to do what's easy, not necessarily what's the most creative. You have to get through these shows. And I think when it comes to all that, it's like, let's just give them a basic wrestling show, a house show, essentially is what it was. And that's what we got. A really good house show, but
Lee Fitting. We'll see if we still see Lee Fitting's name on.
We might see Kevin Dunn's name on there pretty soon once again. The way things are going with Lee Fitting. But for now it seems like he dodged that bullet. It seems like they're just gonna ignore it.
Well, they didn't have credits for Raw yesterday, from what I understand.
Yeah, they didn't. I noticed that.
Yeah, I still haven't watched Raw, so I'll get to that at some point.
I mean, it's a tape show. You don't have to watch it.
I know. I just want to watch for the interviews, and then I'll zip through everything else. All right. So for the first time is in November, Dave mentions the idea of Hogan Warrior at WrestleMania. And the way that he references it is a reader writes in and says they should do Hulk Hogan and Wendy Richter versus Randy Savage and Sherry Martel at WrestleMania. And Dave kind of goes like, I don't think Wendy Richter's coming back, but he does say he's starting to hear things about Hogan versus Warrior. But the one reason why he doesn't think it's going to happen is because they do not want to turn Warrior heel. That's why he thinks they're not doing it. So then we get back to Hogan versus Zeus, and it's still in November before this cage match. Dave thinks that Hogan versus Zeus is a viable candidate for WrestleMania 6. And so he kind of goes back and forth, and he says, at one point, he goes, expect Hogan versus Zeus. Just my speculation, but Warrior is not turning. And he would actually be correct, because they will do a babyface versus babyface match. And so then when it's announced that the cage match for the No Holds Barred match movie combo is not Hogan versus Zeus one-on-one, it's actually the tag, he goes, oh, I wonder if they're saving the one-on-one match for WrestleMania. So he's still in this idea. And the reason why he's stuck on Hogan versus Zeus, and I'll ask you this now because I came to this conclusion once I read The Last Observer of the Year, which is there's no heel set up for Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania, several months out. Like, there's nothing that looks like, if you go back to WrestleMania 1986, Hogan tells that story of he's like, don't worry about WrestleMania 3. It's going to be me and Andre. Like, they actually knew that they were getting there. By WrestleMania 5, you knew that it was going to be Hogan and Savage. And so now in WrestleMania 6, there's no built-up heel. Hogan is running through Boss Man, not a big enough opponent for WrestleMania. Mr. Perfect, not a big enough.
Well, not yet.
For WrestleMania.
The perfect one is brewing, but yeah, I hear you.
But they're already running it on house shows, so they're telling us that it's not a WrestleMania main event. DiBiase, they'd run through that already. Savage, they'd run through that already, and there's no built-up heel. So Dave is just assuming, well, it's got to be Zeus, and then it's not Zeus because he doesn't ever think that they would do a babyface versus babyface WrestleMania.
Right. Yeah, and that took me by surprise. It was way early because, again, growing up, I had always heard the Zeus rumor, but I didn't. I mean, yeah, I had always heard the Zeus rumor going into WrestleMania. So when I saw Dave bring up Warrior Hogan for WrestleMania this early, I was like, wait a minute, but it was always Zeus Hogan. So it was all speculation, but yeah, I think what happened is that he assumed that they were going to run Hogan Zeus at WrestleMania because the cage match was a tag, right?
Yeah,
and it wasn't. Yeah. But to me, I mean, Zeus had run out of steam after SummerSlam.
Yeah.
And we're going to get to,
he gets pinned in that match.
And we're going to get to it because it was such now that I saw everything pretty much in order, it was so awkward because they pull Savage from his program with Duggan out of nowhere because Savage is not even really feuding with Hogan after WrestleMania anymore. He's moved on. He has the feud he wins the crown from Duggan, and he's doing house shows with Duggan, which are completely bombing, by the way. And so he's got his own thing, and Hogan, because I went through all his house shows, because Hogan is just Savage is either working with Duggan or Hogan, but after SummerSlam, Hogan doesn't really have a program. And then they decide to recycle the Ted DiBiase feud for a little while and then bring Zeus in it, even though Zeus had no heat anymore. Yeah. They try to make us forget that Zeus lost at SummerSlam. But it seems by the time they got to the cage match at that No Holds Barred movie match or whatever, like, the program was done. There was nothing to take out of it anymore. And you could tell from the match was a nothing match. So, yeah, there was no way they could have run Zeus all the way to WrestleMania, even if he was undefeated or if he was protected, because there was no program no more. The story was over. Yeah. As far as to me, like, if, I would have turned Jake heel. I think Jake was the one that was, because they had tested that out in 86. And according to Jake, but this is Jake saying it, right? He got more over than Hogan, and then Hogan got scared and canceled the program. But I thought Jake would have made a great opponent for Hogan going into WrestleMania 6. I mean, just imagine the Jake that we got during the Savage program. What was it, about a year and a half, 2 years later? Yeah. We got that Jake you know, because that was closer to Jake's real personality anyway.
Were you surprised that Savage and Jake program didn't really draw? Because when you watch it back, it is tremendous. You would think that thing, you're just printing money with the way that they did it, and it just didn't work.
No, it didn't. But I think, again, look at what Vince was promoting. Vince was promoting a cartoon.
Yeah,
that wasn't a cartoon. You know,
yeah,
that was
totally.
a very dark, like, angle, and so that's probably why it wasn't accepted.
So there's a little nugget in, I think it's the last issue of the year, where Dave brings up the idea of Piper going heel against Hogan for WrestleMania 6. I'd never heard that before.
So at this point, Dave's just throwing darts. That's what he's doing.
What I think he's doing is I think he's trying to figure it out. Like, I think he's like trying to do deductive reasoning and going like, well, they don't have anything if it's since Zeus got pinned. So where are they going? And he's just trying to figure out, you know, the footprints. And he thinks, you know, maybe Roddy, maybe you turn Roddy heel, and that's easy money. And it probably would have been, but it, you know, it wasn't. They're also trying to create Warrior. I would have actually been interested because, you know, the thing about the Warrior thing, or it's 100% in hindsight, and we're not even going to cover 1990. Though I am intrigued to keep reading through on the Observers. The idea of Warrior beating Hogan, I'm sure in WWE's mind, because the same thing is happening in WCW right now, which is like Flair's so on top and they can't get these other guys over him that it's almost a distraction for them. Imagine a bigger shadow than Hulk Hogan. Like, he's the biggest shadow of all time. So in hindsight, you're like, yeah, that was kind of weird, but it seems like, yeah, you have Warrior beat Hogan. You have him put over the guy, and that's your next guy. And it just, you know, it just didn't work out the way that they thought it was.
Right. Well, and there's a lot of reasons. Like I said, we're not going to be able to break down 1990, but just Hogan being political, the lack of heels for the Ultimate Warrior. I mean, there's so many different. It's so funny how similar Sting and Warriors, because they were a tag team, right? And they both were given the title at the same time to carry the companies. And it's so funny how both failed for the same reason. And that's because they were both under the shadow of Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan, but also because of the bad booking, because there was no heels for either of them.
Yeah.
Yep. So here's there were so many lessons here, because what ended up happening, and I'm getting, you know, I'm kind of side topic here, but what happened was that Hogan killed, you know, I don't say killed, but he went through all the heels, right?
Yeah.
Through his entire run. So they didn't set up anybody new. They did have Rick Rude, but Warrior had run through him. So it was like
Rick the Stick, as Dave would call him.
Yes, Rick the Stick. And so by the time Warrior gets the belt, like, they didn't have anybody new. You know, it's like, who is this guy gonna? That would have been a good time to bring in Frank. Oh, Frank Brody was already dead, as JBL calls him.
Yeah, but Vern Gagne was the one who, you know, was shooting on poor Frank after he passed. And there was a note in one of the Observers where Dave basically breaks down. He's like, yeah, that was so tasteless to say that about somebody just because of a booking from your past. Like,
well, yeah, and especially because Frank and Dave were pals, you know, so it just affected Dave even at a personal level. You're being kind to Vern Gagne. Dave let him have it in the Observer.
He did, very much did.
And so yeah. So going back to the original point,
Switch agrees with you, by the way, about Jake going heel to feud, because they're on the same Survivor Series team, which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah, that would have been the great time. Imagine, man, I'm already fantasy booking this.
Just DDTs him right in the middle.
Yes, no, and then Ted DiBiase does this to him, and then, you know, he takes it, because remember, they also hate each other.
Yeah.
So what better way to cement the heel turn than to them hugging it out right there, and then, you know, I guess it's true. Everybody does have a price.
Yeah.
And so that would have been a great main event. That would have filled out the Sky Dome right there, and it would have made real money. It wouldn't have been a flop like Warrior and Hogan was, which a lot of people don't like to hear, but it didn't set the world on fire in the box office. But yeah, just to close out this subject, there was a lack of heels throughout this time, and then also going into 1990, and that was a big problem for both companies.
Yep. Okay, so the no holds barred cage match. Let's just talk about this here because it's not that big of a deal. Like, they build it up, and when you watch it, it's like, it's fine for what it is. You get to see Hogan drop the leg on Zeus.
3 times.
Macho Man is working for like 5 people in this match. Macho and Sherry are both working for 5 people in this match. Macho Man comes off the top of the cage onto his feet to do the axe handle, and then Beefcake hits him in the stomach. Like, I watch wrestling today, and we know that if there's a cage, someone is going off. I just don't remember, outside of the Jimmy Snuka one that WWF played over and over and over again when we were kids, I don't remember them doing tons of stuff off the top of the cage, but Savage was literally on the top of this large, gigantic cage, jumping to his feet. That could have not been great for his knees.
Well, it was only Savage. I don't think anybody. I can't remember anybody else doing that because Savage did it again at that Halloween Havoc about 10 years later, when he's 10 years older, by the way, and a bigger cage,
and he's like 50 pounds heavier because he's even more jacked.
Right. So yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me that Savage only blew out his knee once, and that was later in his career. But let me say this: I was kind of giggling because, as somebody who's, I'm a middle-aged man, as are you, right?
Yes.
So I'm looking at Hogan deliver those 3 leg drops, and I'm thinking, dude, those surgeries in your future, man. I mean, in those hard, like really stiff rings, and he delivers those 3 leg drops one after the other. And I'm not thinking about the spot. I'm thinking about, damn, you're paying for that in the future. And sure enough, he did. So yeah, so that was interesting, and also the most protected leg drops I've ever seen in my life, because Tiny Lister is just like, he's stiff as the board. I probably told him, "Don't move, brother, stay there, and I'll take care of you." And they're like the safest leg drops you've ever seen, right? Where the arch of the leg just barely makes contact with his neck. But props to Zeus, man, because our instinct is to like move and stuff, right? Like you have to just stay there and like have somebody's body land on top of you. But yeah, it was a nothing match. It was the way to write him off storylines. And sure enough, he would go to Puerto Rico, and then he would go to WCW for a one shot, and we never saw him again. And
the Z Gangster.
Yeah, the Z Gangster. That's right.
So LaRocca and I were talking about this the other day, and it just had nothing. It doesn't really have anything to do with this. But when you said that Hogan hitting 3 leg drops, which is, today the kids would say, "Oh, he's spamming his finisher." LaRocca and I were trying to remember when wrestling became finishers. You kick out of finishers, and then you hit each other's finishers, and then you got to go back to hitting like multiple finishers for the match to actually be over. And he was saying, because a lot of people will say All Japan, and he says no, that was a little bit more aggressive, and the fights were more intense. It's not spamming finishers. And I said, Austin Rock, WrestleMania 17, like that's kind of when I remember it happening, but that would be like WWE big match style for WrestleMania matches like Shawn Michaels and Undertaker and this, where you kick out of finishers. But Hogan does 3 on Zeus to put him away. So you can even go back to 1989 for Hogan to have to hit his finisher 3 times to win a match.
Right. And then of course, WrestleMania 7 with Savage and Warrior,
the elbows,
Savage hits him with 5 elbows, and then Warrior hits him with the 3 tackles, his wacky finisher. But I think as far as the staple, a trope, I would have to say ECW, because I remember Raven and Tommy Dreamer like exchanging DDTs over and over and kicking out and building that drama. Where Paul Heyman got it from, I don't know, maybe Puerto Rico. I don't know, because everything starts either in Memphis or Puerto Rico, it seems like, when it comes to these overused gimmicks, So that's where I first remember it. And then, you got to remember that a lot of the indie guys from the late 90s, the Christopher Daniels, the Brian Danielsons, the Spankies, these guys, they grew up on that stuff. They started watching that stuff. And then also, I think All Japan was influential, I don't think that's where it came from, but it was definitely influential. I think that whole fighting spirit, like that whole, it takes more than one finisher to put you away, is definitely from All Japan.
Mm-hmm.
But the spamming of the finishers, I would have to say ECW. So when you get all these, when you put it all in a pot, you come up with the early 2000s independent style, right?
Yeah.
Which is where it really built the fan base. And then it translated over to like all of a sudden we're seeing it in the main event of WrestleMania 17.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But remember Paul Heyman is always in the background of all these things, man. And Paul Heyman was there for WrestleMania 17. So you know, to me, he's very smart in that he sees the entire landscape. You know, he's not just focused on his company. So he knows what the quote unquote kids like. So it wouldn't surprise me if he's the one that introduced those spots, because I don't think Pat Patterson, that doesn't seem like his style, you know.
Well, I mean, it got to the point where Will Ospreay had a finisher, and then he would develop a new finisher, and then he would develop a newer finisher. And it's like the dude has like 4 finishers, and like his original finisher is now a transitional move in a match.
Right. Somebody should bring up like I remember in the mid 2000s when Bryan Danielson tried to get over the small package as his finisher, and he would that would be his finisher, and it was wacky.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to do something like that. Just the more base, like a suplex. Like I know Dustin Rhodes, you know, he's essentially has a suplex, right? Except he has that little tilt to it.
Yeah.
And that's like his finisher. But I like that, you know, because that's why I like when they brought back the power driver. You know, I would have liked Randall Cade, who had sold it a little better. Like not in the way he sold it post match. I thought it was great, but just the way he took it. Like, you know, I wish he would have allowed Kevin Owens to be a little more stiff on it, so that it would have been more believable. It was like the safest.
He's also so big. Like I can imagine.
It would have been a danger. So maybe he was right in telling him to take it easy.
Yeah.
But I like that stuff, because that stuff it kind of primes you to think, okay, you know what, these things are passable as finishers.
And I think if you watch only WWE, that finish probably worked really well on you. But if you watch more than just WWE, you probably rolled your eyes at them trying to do that. I don't blame them for trying to do something like that. That's just wrestling. But it was really hard for me to like be like, yeah, like this is actually, you know, something that makes, you know, that feels impactful. I was like, dude, I just seen this dude take a pile driver
himself every match, essentially.
Exactly. So it's hard to be to not be numb to that stuff.
No, I get it. It is hard.
So Rick Steiner and Scott Steiner win the tag straps on November the 1st, but it won't be acknowledged until November the 18th, which means they go through a whole clash where the Freebirds are still the champs against the Road Warriors. But the push for the Steiner brothers is happening, and they're the champs going into Starcade, right?
Yes. The Steiners are the champions, correct.
All right. We got to talk about this Tully Blanchard thing. Dave writes about this Tully Blanchard thing as a way to show a lot of hypocrisy going on in wrestling. So essentially what happens, Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson, they're going to go back to WCW. They give their notice. You know, they agree to stay through the Survivor Series, but by staying through the Survivor Series, they also do a taping, a Saturday Night's Main Event taping, which is before the Survivor Series. And so the idea or the issue that Vince McMahon has with Tully Blanchard is that he also realizes, or he's hearing from somebody, I wonder who's the one that stooged Tully out, that Tully is trying to grab some talent to go back to WCW.
Probably Hogan, if you believe Jesse the Mind Ventura.
Yeah. That would not surprise me. Though I think Tully is smart enough to like keep away from Hogan. He's probably like, he seems too savvy. It had to be, you know, one of the other guys,
Lanny Poffo, because he just got he gets a push all of a sudden at the end of the year.
There you go. And so they're in the process of leaving. They do the Saturday Night's Main Event taping, which we'll get to, and they go through that match. But when we get to the Survivor Series, the storyline of the Survivor Series is Jesse the Body, the journalist, has an inside scoop that something's going on with the Heenan family. And as a result, and we'll talk about this when we get to the review, Tully Blanchard is not at that show. So they fire Tully And they say that he has been fired for failing a cocaine test. And Dave writes, we can you can be jokeful about this. It's the reason why he got fired for cocaine is because they didn't find steroids. Like that was his joke. But what happens is WCW all of a sudden believes Tully is hands off because Tully and Arn are supposed to be back in WCW for a big angle in early December. But
Right.
they get cold feet on Tully because they believe that this bad PR will actually hurt them. And so Tully's like a man with no home. Like he has no place to go. He gets fired by WWF, even though he was leaving already. And now he's not going to be in WCW because they get cold feet on him. And he's like gone. Like this is like reading this back. I'm like, what the hell? This is not the wrestling business as I understand it. Like, why is WCW so afraid to bring Tully in based off of him failing a cocaine test?
I think again, like I texted you, I think Tully was a victim of the political mind games that were being played by both companies. Yeah, like Dave says, like if this in a vacuum, nobody would be hurt by it, right? Because nobody cares. But in this particular situation, I think NWA-WCW felt like, okay, if we bring Tully in, WWF's PR machine is gonna say that we hired a wrestler that they terminated, right? Because it also builds up WWF as these people that are protecting the wrestlers because of cocaine, failure of a cocaine test. So, we live. That's a world that's very paranoid. So I think they were making all these assumptions, and they just would rather not do business with Tully, right? Just to not get into that situation. So I think this was a situation where Tully was used as bait to further along the feud between WWF and WCW. And I think and it's like it's sad because Tully would never recuperate. I mean, the next time he would pop up would be in ECW in like '93 in a three-way that was not very good. Another thing to add to that is that Tully was a guy that had a very strong personality, right? He
Mm-hmm.
was a guy that wasn't exactly a friendly guy. So that probably hurt him as well. He had enemies. Son of a promoter, you're always going to have a target on your back if you're a son of a promoter. So all that mixed in really screwed him over at the end, and I think Vince was pissed because they lied to him. I think Vince, didn't like the fact that they were going to leave him for going back to WCW. I think with Arn, he's so beloved by everyone that it was hard to get any dirt on him. Because if it was Vince, he would have fucked both of them.
Yeah.
But he just Arn was Arn, and I think Dave brings up a great point. Right at the end of the day, you have to be accountable for your actions,
Mm-hmm.
and Totally should have seen all this
Yeah.
and no pun intended, he should have kept his nose clean. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like
Yeah.
that, and that they wouldn't have had nothing on him had he not. But because he was totally, he let his habits get in the way of it, and it cost him a lot of money. Because again, we can't ever say, oh well, he got signed a year late. He never comes back to the big
Yeah.
time ever.
And Arn basically gets his pay cut in half because WCW says, well, you're more valuable as a part of this tag team. And now that your buddy screwed it up, we're not bringing you back for the same money that we said we were. So they kind of they screw Tully and then they screw Arn
Yes,
in bringing him back. And then
that's
Arn is persona non grata in WWF. So it's not like he can go back to Vince and beg for the job back. He's already promised them, and they've already got stuff with him and Flair, and they're redoing the Four Horsemen. So yeah, crazy time frame. So
and people wonder why the wrestlers of yesteryear are bitter at Roman Reigns getting 15 mil to work twice a year, because these guys had to work hard for their money, and
wait,
they
was
got
this was a Jim Herd decision, right?
yeah, it
Jim
was Jim
Herd.
Herd, yeah, it wasn't Oli yet, it wasn't any of those guys, it was Jim Herd.
Yeah, okay. Because Switch, who we mentioned, he was wondering.
But at the
Uh,
end of the day, it was still Jim Herd and Vince McMahon measuring their dick sizes, and that's all
yeah.
it came down to, and there was people that were victims of consequences because of it.
I guess maybe the only person who makes out in this is Ole, because Ole gets a role on television to replace Tully.
Yeah, and he would keep it. Well, then he would get the book then the following year.
Yeah.
So you know,
All right. So our first mention of the name El Gigante
oh yeah,
is in this time frame where Dave mentions that they have signed him and he's an experiment and they're going to try to do the Andre gimmick with him, but he is a legit 7'7" or whatever, 7'4" or whatever he was. There's also an injury to Sid Vicious during this time frame. He will get hurt in the Clash match, which we'll talk about. Scott Steiner gives him a suplex, and he hurts his rib, and then the rib punctures his lung, and it collapses his lung, and so he's just out of it. He's no timetable as far as a return, which actually then screws up the Iron Man tournament for the tag team side because Sid is gone.
more than anything, it screws up Sid. You know, this to me has a lot of parallels of when you have a like, I'm a big baseball fan, as you all know. You know, when you have a guy that's signed for a multi, you know, like let's say Juan Soto, for example.
Yeah.
Not that I wish it happens, you know, whatever. But let's say Juan Soto comes into the Mets and then, you know, he gets hurt the first week of the season, and all of a sudden you're like, now what? Because people don't understand that Sid's momentum here. It's huge. People were comparing him to Hogan.
Yeah.
He was going to be the savior of WCW. This whole skyscrapers thing was just being done as an introduction. Eventually, he was going to get pushed to the top. So 1990 was going to be the year of Sid Vicious, right? And again, he would have been a perfect rival for Sting. Had Sting, you know, they would have been perfect right there. Although he does come back later in the year, but this throws all the plans out the window, and it's so frustrating because, I mean, goddamn, I mean, he was there, and we'll never know what kind of difference it would have made in Sid's career. But yeah, he gets hurt. And what's interesting is that I think he was just walking around, right, like with a broken rib.
Is that at the airport or something?
Yeah, like it punctured his lung because he didn't get medical attention once it happened. So he's just walking around with a bone hanging out, I guess.
Yeah.
And it punctures his lung, and that's really what put him out, the punctured lung. And so, yeah, man, it would be a long time before. I think he would come back in the middle of 90. So it would be about 6-7 month injury. And then that's where they would put Mark Callis with Dan Spivey. But yeah, it was very scary injury for sure. And it was in one of those wacky Scott Steiner moves that he would pop out from time to time, because he had a bunch of them.
What did you have you ever heard anything about what the booking was supposed to be if the skyscrapers were still in that tournament?
No, no speculation or nothing.
Because the Samoans, they were
the commander of that year.
they were. I mean, their whole role in that tournament was like
mortals.
Yeah, just a bunch of stalling though. I mean, they weren't even up to their snuff because they were actually. And I guess one of those guys decided not to go to the tournament, so they had to replace him with the Savage. The Samoan Savage is in the tournament, but like their role in that tournament was nothing special. I thought they were really boring compared to what they could have been. But then I thought, you know, what were the skyscrapers supposed to do? And then I thought, why aren't the Midnight Express in that tournament? And Jim Ross does talk to Corny about that during the show. A little bit, like Corny saying, yeah, you know, we're kind of on the outside in. We're just waiting for all these teams to kill each other, and then we're going to pick off, you know, all of them. But the Midnight Express would have been amazing in that tournament because the matches would have all been better.
I think, yeah, I don't think the skyscrapers were going to do much. I thought the Steiners should have won because it was obvious the Steiners were the tag team of the future. But I'm sure the Road Warriors threw their little political thing in there, and they ended up winning it, which was dumb because they were definitely not the tag team. Even this whole year would tell you they were not the tag team they used to be.
Yeah.
So I think the skyscrapers at best would have been number 3. Maybe Doom would have been number 4 for that whole tournament, instead of Doom being number 3 and then the Samoans being 4th. But maybe it would have been a good like showcase for Sid though. In losing efforts, you know, maybe they would have given him a lot. Yeah. I mean, if they would have, if Hawk and Animal would have allowed themselves to be thrown around by Sid, which is a big ask, that would have made a good visual, as long as it doesn't go back to Japan. You know what I'm saying? Because the Road Warriors would not allow that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. If the Road Warriors beat the Steiners rather than the other way around, would they be okay with the Steiners winning the titles? I guess, I mean, I'm sorry, the tournament. I guess they would have if then that meant that they were beating the Steiners for the straps. But probably since they weren't going to beat the Steiners for the straps, they were like, well, we don't care. We want to win this Iron Man thing.
Right.
So,
And
yeah.
I think the compromise was like, well, if the Steiners beat the Road Warriors, then we could use that to put over the Steiners, right? Just
Right.
that match alone. But they
Right.
never really pushed that match because they just erased it from history, even though it was a big match. I was as a kid, I was looking forward to that match.
And you know what? Rewatching it, it was a little bit of a precursor to one of my favorite matches as a kid of all time, which is the Steiner brothers versus Lex and Sting.
Oh, I love that match.
You talk about just high spots. Like that's what this match was. It was just all high spots as well. They're just hitting all their big moves. And Cornette explains why the fans aren't reacting during this match, which we'll get to. And we'll talk about that there. But he even had to point out, because it's like, yeah, these are two baby faces. So the fans aren't really reacting. So yeah. I thought that was good. Okay, so let's talk about this kind of the end of the 89 Observers, which is Dave explaining that if it's up to Turner, Flair is kind of on his way out, and they really, really, really want Luger and Sting to be the future. And it's interesting because he basically says what happens, which is neither of them in the ring can hold a candle to Rick, and it's going to hurt them. And if they actually do become the top guy, the fans are going to look at it as, well, they're no Ric Flair. And so Dave kind of predicts the future for all of 1990. I thought it was fascinating to read all of the things that his instincts told him about the business and about where wrestling in 1990 was going. Now, he doesn't know about the Hogan Warrior stuff. So I actually do want to read forward to 90 to see what he says about Warrior, if he's basically writing the same thing about Warrior that he was writing about Sting and Luger. But what did you think about the whole positioning of Sting and Luger in November and December as we realize really where they're going with this?
I thought it was interesting. I thought, I felt like Luger was ready and trying to put myself in like 1989 eyes. I mean, Luger was over. He had a chance both as a babyface and a heel in 1989, and he got pretty over on both sides. His work rate had improved. What I would say 100%. I mean, the guy just brought it in 89, match after match. And I, he was paired up with good workers. I mean, his closing feud of 89 would have been, I think, Brian Pillman, right? I think that would have been. So, but Brian Pillman wasn't he was green still, and he got a good match out of him. So just if I was an executive in 1989, I'm seeing Luger's career progression. I'm ready. I'm thinking this guy's ready to go to the next level next year. So let's put him in. Let's start slotting him in at that level. Sting, the same thing. Sting, we talked about in the last episode. Sting really came to prominence, in my opinion, with the Great Muta feud. The Ric Flair match at the Clash 1 in '88 was a great introduction, but we talked about how, much like Steve Austin, there was that long gap of like, let's put the rocket on his ass. So Sting was also ready. So to me, they had an embarrassment of riches, right? It's like, who wouldn't want two top tier baby faces ready to go? And then you have Ric Flair, who 89 wasn't his best year at the box office for a lot of reasons. Now they're thinking, yeah, he could still work, but what does that even mean? Very much like AEW today, right? It's like you have great work rate, but the bottom line is still the bottom line, and it's not affecting the bottom line. So we're ready for Lex or Sting. I could totally see why they came to that conclusion, because think about it. Flair had no leverage other than his work rate.
And he
and that
also gets removed as the booker. They basically call him like chairman of the booking committee or something, but he's gone as the day-to-day booker.
Right. My whole thing that kind of stands out during this editorial from Dave is that there is no like, this is all an all or nothing thing by Turner, right? There is no like, let's make Ric Flair the Babe Ruth of wrestling, you know. Let's make him the gatekeeper, kind of like Kenny Omega wants to become today or whatever. Like, there's a place for these guys, right? I mean, I don't think Kenny Omega should be there now, but certainly maybe a couple years from now. But he says he wants to be there now, so we'll see. But anyways, with Ric Flair, yeah, there is a like, let's make him the gatekeeper, but there was no talk of that. It was either let's put him out to pasture or like keep him on top. Like, there's no middle ground here. But I could see why they came to that conclusion, like I just stated. So
I don't know if I've ever asked you about this, but the very first SummerSlam, 1988, Brother Love does a segment, and the idea was that Ric Flair was supposed to be the surprise in that segment.
Yeah.
And I wonder if Flair, knowing what is going to happen in 90 and 91, would have just been like, F it, I'm going to WWF. No matter if I have to be second fiddle to Hogan, like, it's just going to be, at least I'll be on the biggest stage with this company. Because, you know, he did have a lot of loyalty to Crockett at that point, right? And this is before Crockett sells to Turner. So that's an interesting thing. Like, it's an interesting decision. Like, it's like a fork in the road thing for Rick, right? You stay with NWA or you go to WWF. He's going to go eventually because WWF puts him out of business, but kind of an interesting. I wonder, like, that's an interesting one. You know, I did have the opportunity to interview him. I think I know what he would have said, though. He would have said in that time, in that time and place, he's the man, and he's promised to be the man. So it's his job to kind of lead that company as the man. So I think that would be his answer, but it's still a fascinating thing to think about.
I think, because I think we all go through this. I think you've gone through this. I've gone through this. I think there's always, like, you know, Monday morning quarterbacking on our careers a year down the road. I think you want to take care of the what if questions.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that he was allowed to have the year of 89 that he got, I think that was enough for him to justify staying.
Sure.
You know, I think, honestly, to be honest with you, I think he would have been very miserable day one in WWF, because he wouldn't have been the nature boy, as we saw when he actually ended up going up there. He wasn't going to get the respect that he deserved as a former, at that time, what was it, 7-time world champ, because he didn't get that when he went up there, right? So we're seeing what would have happened in 88 from what happened in 91. So I think he would have been very miserable. I think Hogan would have not, you know, Hogan would have tried to squash him like he tried to squash everyone else. So I think he did. I think just the fact that he was able to get 89, being a booker, put that on his resume, have the matches that he had, be with his friends all night partying, I think that justified his decision to stay.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. All right, let's talk about. So instead, I think the Clash show happens like the week of the Survivor Series, but I kind of want to put the Clash and Starrcade back to back. So let's talk about Survivor Series and the Saturday Night's Main Event right after, and we'll do it in that order instead. So Survivor Series 1989. This Survivor Series is set up in an interesting way, which, if we could have sort of gone back and seen where they were going, go like, oh yeah, it makes sense. The Ultimate Warriors team is in the main event, and Hulk Hogan's team is in the middle of the show, which when I was a kid, I hated, because I wanted to see Hogan in the main event. And once the Hogan match was over on this show, I was kind of like, do I really want to watch the rest of this thing? Like, it's not as interesting to me. So that was really interesting. And I also thought, when I was watching this show, if you think of who the main heels are on the opposite side of Hogan and Warrior's team, Hogan and Warrior kind of take the easy way out. Like Zeus gets kicked out of this match so early, and same with Andre. Andre gets counted out right at the beginning of the match. So Ultimate Warrior doesn't have to go through Andre. He eventually will have to go through Bobby the Brain Heenan of all people. And for Hogan, Zeus, the main man, like if you bought that pay-per-view because you wanted to see Hogan and Zeus go to battle again, you're like, oh man, this is cheap. Zeus is done so early. And now I got to pay for this cage match down the line. So you feel a little bit conned. But that's wrestling back then. But still, I was like, man, that one, they did the easy way out on both of these. And Ultimate Warrior and Andre would follow up with their Saturday Night's Main Event show, which was that weekend, I think. Recorded 2 weeks before. But still, it was like just wrestling manipulation 101 on this show, I thought.
Well, I mean, that's wrestling even today. I mean, you're when it comes to like whatever justifies the booking is really what they're gonna do. It's like when what was it, the Saudi show, right, where they had Randy Orton and Kevin Owens in a nothing segment, but it was promoted as a match.
Yeah. I didn't like that. I know a lot of people like that. I was like, you guys just got conned. Like, what are you talking about?
Right, but it's wrestling. I mean, even something, like overanalyzed by my end anyway, as like Cody not defending the title at Saturday Night's Main Event. No, not at the Survivor Series.
Yeah,
right. It's like, well, he's a champ. Why isn't he defending? Well, because we got War Games, and that should be enough for you. So this is always going to be a thing. To me, a con would be if the entire promotion was centered around Zeus against Hogan, and they didn't do that for the Survivor Series. It was the team concept.
Yeah,
it was the Hogan Zeus confrontation was still going to be a sizzle to the steak. It wasn't the steak. So I don't consider that a con, actually. And they did give you about a minute and a half of action with them, and then Zeus just broke his neck in front of a live audience, and that was it. So I don't know. Maybe like you said, maybe I'm being worked, but I don't see there's certain things that I see as a con, and certain things that I don't see as a con. I don't see that as a con. I always liked this show growing up. This is one of my biggest rentals as a kid. I always like to rent the videotape of this show, especially because in the Coliseum video, I don't know if you ever saw the Coliseum video version. Before the show starts, they show the production setting up, and it's pretty awesome.
No way.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome what they do. They show like Jesse getting like riled up like before it's pretty cool, and they show the wrestlers throwing out their makeup and all that stuff. It was a pretty cool. It's like kind of like the WrestleMania 4 intro as well. And then they go live, and then they go into the classic what I'm thankful for, right?
Yeah.
I'm thankful I'm not Ricky Rude, I'm thankful for my polka dots, I'm thankful I'm the world's smartest man, stuff like that. And then that was a classic. I mean, that's a classic vignette. But it does lose a little luster there towards the end. Survivor Series concept was always hard because you have so many finishes. You have so many finishes that you have to come up with, and so fast, right? Yeah. So this is where you fall into the trap of like people getting pinned after a transitional move. Only in the Survivor Series will that happen, because you have to get them out. Yeah. So all they did was they just merged all the house show programs from all the guys. They broke them down in teams, and that was your card.
Yeah, I agree. I think there was way too many count out finishes on this show. Like they just went to that thing when they didn't have a better idea, just the count out, which, whatever.
Well, back then they had to protect the house shows. So you couldn't show Rick Rude pinning Roddy Piper because you need to save it for the house shows. Not that it would happen anyway, because nobody's gonna pin Piper during this time, but they couldn't do those pinfalls. All right, let's thinking if you show them now, then they're not gonna go to the house shows to watch the actual pinfall.
All right, let's go through all of the finishes in these matches. So we had the Dream Team, Dusty, Brutus, the Red Rooster, and Tito against the Enforcers, who were the Big Boss Man, Bad News Brown, Rick Martel, and the Honky Tonk Man. So Rick Martel pins Tito with a reverse roll up.
Is that the most lopsided feud of all time, man? I don't think we ever saw Tito beat Rick Martel one time, and they wrestled 1,000 times.
I think
after it
that was the heat because Tito was so beloved by the fans, and that's how you just kept Rick hot, was you kept beating that dude.
right, right. So yeah, he just over and even in a tag match like this where the pinfalls don't really count, he still beats them.
You know, Bad News Brown, unfortunate that he is passed, but I would love for them to bring him back in a match just so he could walk out on the finish all over again.
He did that about 4 times, man. That was his thing.
So Bad News Brown gets hit accidentally by the Big Boss Man, walks out. So exact same thing that they did the year before.
My question would be like when you're trying to hit up old Bad News Allen, right? Like, will you be on my team? Like, why would he have any incentive to say yes? Like, why? Because he's a very moody guy. He's very moody. So, do you catch him in the right time? Do
He
you
doesn't
buy
like
dinner?
anybody.
But
maybe it was on the take Tunney. He told him he's gonna be suspended if he's not in the match or something.
That's true. That's true. Because I want to see a vignette of the actual process of him agreeing to be on the team that he doesn't want to be in. He doesn't talk to any of these guys. Like when they're going through strategy, where is he at? Like, is he in the corner? Is he just not there? Is he outside? Like, where is he at? You know, I would like to see something like that. But yeah, he would always just walk out on them.
So Beefcake soon thereafter pinned the Honky Tonk Man after the flying knee.
The high knee.
The high knee when in '86 when Beefcake was doing the stripper from San Francisco gimmick.
The high knee.
Then the next fall was only a few minutes after. Martel was using the ropes to pin Beefcake, but the ref kicked Martel's hands, and Beefcake caught him in the sun.
Which was another classic Martel pinfall. I saw that at house shows many times with him. He would always get pinned that way.
The next fall was just 47 seconds after the Boss Man caught the Red Rooster in the side slam.
That looked awesome, by the way. That finish was he just caught him and he spiked them, and then Rooster doesn't move. He's just out. He just and then I think Bossman just covers them and just pins them. That was a great finish.
You know what? I think Daz is correct about this. Bad News was a replacement for Akeem. I was trying to remember why Akeem was a late exit from this show.
They never said. He didn't get hurt. I mean, well, the Observer was missing, man. That bothered me.
Yeah.
but I think I think it was an angle just to get Bad News in the match. I don't think there was a reason why Akeem wasn't there. They just pulled him for Bad News just so Bad News could walk out and can contribute to his character development. That was it.
All right. So then we're down to Boss Man with Dusty and Beefcake, and then Dusty pins Boss Man with a one-legged cross body block. I'm not sure
the laziest cross body block you're ever gonna see, because Dusty's so lazy.
Yeah.
That Boss Man has to he has to hook his own leg essentially. Boss Man lifts the leg to remind, hey, Dusty, hook my leg, right? And then Dusty doesn't even do that. What Dusty does is he grabs the Boss Man's pants just to say I hooked something. He doesn't even actually hook it, you know. But Boss Man actually has to raise his own leg. So yeah, just wacky Dusty being Dusty in '89.
It's like a crossbody, like people, if you can sort of visualize it, it's like the wrestler kind of jumps and tries to get perpendicular on the dive. Dusty keeps one foot on the ground on his body.
Yes.
And the Boss Man has to take that one.
He takes the whole bump.
But the Boss Man does get his revenge because he takes Beefcake out with the nightstick, and then he hits Dusty with it, and then they handcuff Dusty to the ropes, and they beat him until Brutus comes with the clippers, and Dusty actually does juice. And the WWE is not really doing blood at this point, so that was kind of interesting.
And Dusty being Dusty.
So next match was Randy Savage in the Earthquake and Dino Bravo and Greg the Hammer against Duggan, Bret Hart, Ronnie Garvin, and Hercules. Poor Hercules just gets squashed within the first 4 minutes of this match.
No. We have to talk about the big travesty of justice. First of all, Ron Garvin's ducktail is the tag team. He's got that 1980s little thing gimmick going with the flat top and just like a little tail hand, like a rat tail, right? The Sting rat tail is what they called it.
Yeah, yeah.
Also,
Sting had a fantastic rat tail at Starcade, by the way. That thing was like blown out. It was fantastic.
But Ron Garvin did not. And then, because Ron Garvin had the flat top a little too high, not Kid and Play style, but it was pretty lumpy.
Yeah.
And then he had the rat tail, and it wasn't as long. So somebody had to pull him aside on that one.
And he was somebody's uncle at that point. He shouldn't have had a rat tail.
But the baby faces also try to do this like cheerleader-esque like sequence with the 2x4s, and they completely blow the spot because they come out running in a very cartoon fashion, and then they go in a little circle, and then they try to throw the 2x4s to each other, and then they drop them.
Yes.
And we're just supposed to forget we saw that. But yeah, so that was the team, and then also Earthquake was the replacement for the Widowmaker because the Widowmaker was originally in this match. So
yes,
but yeah, like you said, Hercules got squashed early on.
Dazza said Akeem got hurt, which is why they did the replacement.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, I've been trying to look for that information for years.
So Hercules is out first. Garvin and Valentine kind of get involved, and that was the feud. Duggan clotheslines Valentine for the second fall. Dino Bravo pins Garvin with the side slam soon thereafter, and then Hart misses a tackle in the corner. Bravo gives him a shoulder breaker, and Savage pins him after the elbow. So Dazza also said Brett and Savage was he thought makes this match a little bit more memorable.
It was interesting about this show. I'm gonna tell you what was interesting, and maybe this could just be me, like in hindsight, seeing things that are not really there. But I do feel like Vince gave a lot to Brett and Sean in this show.
Mm-hmm.
Like both of them got a lot of offense. They look great. And they did the job at the end, but they were protected, I would say, for their level of where they were at.
They had an opportunity to stand out.
Yeah.
Because there's an underwave. We think about, I almost wonder today, there's so much wrestling on TV today. I really wonder who the hardcore fans are versus the casual fan. I don't really know too many casual fans. Like a lot of people who watch wrestling, they mostly watch as much as possible. But Dazza was mentioning like being a Brett fan back then, and you're kind of like a little bit of an underground hardcore fan if you're a Brett fan. And same thing with Sean, right? Anybody with eyes can see that Sean is kind of a budding star, but he's stuck in this tag team. And back then, tag teams are mid-card.
And he's small for the time.
And he's small. But if you're like the hardcore fan, you're kind of rooting for Brett. You're rooting for Sean. And so I'm sure on a show like this where you get to see both of your guys do well, it's probably pretty fulfilling, even knowing that they're not going to win the matches.
Yeah, but my question is, did Vince see that? Because it seems like he did, because he gave them these opportunities on this show. What is it? We're about 2-3 years removed from him giving them any real shot. So,
he probably sees them as future Intercontinental champions, right? Like that was the worker belt at the time.
Right.
And so they would fit in there. I'm sure he didn't think just a couple years later they would actually be his world title guys, but wrestling changes, in 5 years or 6 years, like really fast. So
yeah. Very interesting show for that reason.
So then it's Hacksaw against everybody. And, Hacksaw played the kind of the goofy dumb guy role very well. I don't know if that was really him as a human or if he was just great at that. But Sherry pulls down the top rope and he flies over the top and he can't get back in and he gets the count out finish. So the King's Court wins the match and Duggan gets counted out.
Well, I mean, he always played that person who was whose IQ came into question, we'll just put it that way. Because in Canada he was going USA. And Jesse Ventura let him have it on that show too. Like, look at this dummy, he's in Canada. But anyways, yeah.
Well, what's the unfortunate one is you know, every once in a while, this dude would just have a hanging booger in his nose and just not realize. Like that was
Right.
another one. That was
That was
another
another.
thing for Hacksaw. Every couple years, there's a match that just has a snot hanging from his nose and he doesn't clean it up. Okay, so then the next match is the Hogan match. So you got Hogan, Jake, and Demolition. Well, what a team that was. Jeez.
That's not my favorite one, bro. The Von Erich and the Road Warriors
And the Road
Warriors,
Warrior.
my
Yeah.
favorite one.
That's the best one. That's the best one of all time. And then against the $1 Million Team, Ted DiBiase, Zeus, and the Powers of Pain. That's another great match. Like the Powers of Pain wouldn't actually be great as the Powers of Pain in WWF, but I remember them against the Road Warriors in WCW and just thinking like these guys are going to be the next big thing. And you know, they don't actually as a team become the next big thing, but it's still very cool set of teams here for this match. So
Right.
Zeus gets DQ'd very early in this match, like we say, after 3 minutes or so. Then Warlord pins Axe when Mr. Fuji pins.
He trips him. He trips him. Like,
yeah, he trips
again,
Axe.
the transitional move.
Yeah, trips him. And then the Barbarian pins Smash with the clothesline.
In a great spot. I love that spot where he just turns around and he catches that flying clothesline. And then again, like much like we saw Terry Taylor, Smash is just done. He just lays there. He's like out, and then he just gets pinned. Barbarian was very underrated as a big man worker, man. He always had decent matches. Like even in WCW with the Faces of Fear, nobody ever gives him his props for being like he could move, you know, he could fly.
He just couldn't promo.
Yeah, he just couldn't promo. But he had a great matches with the Boss Man, who was another underrated big man. And yeah, here's another example. He was up there in the top rope, hit Smash with the flying clothesline, and then he pins him.
So Hogan finally tags in after Jake's getting beat up. But this is a real ridiculous spot. Hogan gets the stuff pile driver by both members of the Powers of Pain, and they get disqualified and kicked out of the match. This is what I'm talking about, where Hogan gets the cheap victory here in this match.
Oh, his entire run as Hulkamania. He also told Beefcake to get out of the cage because he wanted the spotlight when he takes Zeus out. He kicked Beefcake out of the cage on live TV.
Yeah, Beefcake was trying to come back to help him. He's like, nope, you're not helping me.
And he wonders why they all turned on him, including Beefcake in WCW.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Powers of Pain got to protect them for the house shows, which pisses me off, but they did it. So that leaves us with Ted against Jake and Hogan, right?
Yeah.
Which is weird. That's a handicap match for the heel.
DiBiase beats Jake with a fish drop and then pins him by holding onto the ropes.
With Jake trying to kick out, which is, I've never seen that before.
Oh, we're going to talk about some kickouts in this Starcade match because Sting and Lex maybe has the worst like fall I've ever seen in a wrestling match.
That's right.
So, you know, Jake has to hit a DDT on somebody in this match. So he hits it on poor Virgil. So at least he hits it on somebody. And then Hogan, you know, does the Superman thing and beats DiBiase. So Hogan's gone, though he will show up in an interview segment where they set up the double cage or the cage match, the tag team cage match.
Which I think I know you had your theory as to why the Warrior was last because they were getting him ready to be last at all the shows because he's the new top guy. But I also think they also had Hogan go third here because they had to shoot the angle for the steel cage match later on.
Though you could have had Hogan win the match, pose, and then they could have done some shenanigans. But then again, they're not going off.
They didn't like to go off without. Then, yeah, they never did that back then.
It wasn't until Triple H where they were okay with doing that.
Right.
All right. So then the Rudes brood. So actually, they go to intermission, and then when they come back from the intermission, then they do the Hogan Beefcake thing where they're setting up this match, and Sherry Martel comes out, throws powder, and Zeus and Savage come out and beat those guys up.
Right.
So the Rudes brood, Rick Rude, Mr. Perfect, and the Rougeos beat Rowdy's Roddies, Piper, Snuka, and the Bushwhackers. This is kind of a fun match because you get to see Mr. Perfect work with guys who, not really working with all the times was kind of cool. And I think Dazza mentioned Snuka and Perfect as kind of being a cool thing, which I thought as well.
They had the final sequence. They had an awesome final sequence in that match. Like the
Yeah.
final 5 minutes are just them having a one-on-one, and they're fucking awesome. Snuka always he had like he was like almost 50 at this point, and he had like a body of like a 25-year-old, which was fucking disturbing and impressive at the same time. I remember his calves used to remind me of those old Ninja Turtle figures because they were like so defined and stuff. Like, and then he wore no shoes, so it were like Ninja Turtle feet. But yeah, this was also the swan song of the Rujos. This would be their last match in the territory, and then they would come back for the Royal Rumble for one shot. And what I like about this match is that they're all buddies, right? Rude and Perfect are like actual best friends in real life at this time. And then Piper gets along with Rude and Perfect. They're all like running mates. So they're all just having a good time in this match. The only thing is that, and at this time they couldn't do that because we were in the cartoon world, but they didn't bring up why Roddy Piper was teaming with Snuka. Like they were like mortal enemies. You know what I'm saying? And here they are teaming like nothing happened a few years ago.
Well, what about the little promo that they did where they're all like taking bites out of like food and stuff?
Disgusting. Those promos with them or the Islanders doing that, it was always disgusting. Because you gotta think like there's one thing to like act, but these like Luke has a chicken bone and like his crotch, and they're biting it and stuff, and it's like you can't fake that. It's happening right before my eyes. Like I wouldn't take a bite out of a chicken bone that came out of Luke's crotch. I don't care how much you pay me. Like,
okay, but when I was a kid, didn't Afa? I don't remember if it was Afa or Sika. Didn't he like bite into like raw chicken or something on like TNT, like Tuesday Night Titans? That was disgusting.
Yeah,
how do you fake that?
You gotta believe the character, man. You gotta believe the character.
Like, how did he just not get salmonella poisoning like right away?
Well, I'm sure once they all cut, he's like sticking his thumb up his mouth, like. But when you're in it, you gotta be in it,
So this match, Snuka beats Jacques Rougeau with Superfly Splash. Then Piper pins Raymond after a pile driver. So the Rougeaus get eliminated first. Then it's the Bushwhackers' turn to get eliminated. Perfect pins Butch with a cradle, and then Rude pins Luke with the Rude Awakening. So we're down to 2-on-2. Piper and Rude, they're fighting, man, and they get the double count out. This was the count out that I was fine with because it looked like they were actually fighting, and they were in the mix of like this felt like okay, this makes sense as to why they both got counted out.
Yeah, and they would have the blow off the next month in the cage as well. So.
And then the next one was Perfect against Snuka, and after about 3 minutes of back and forth and some fun back and forth, he does pin with the Perfect Plex. But I think Dave gave this one the best rating out of all the matches. He gave this one a 3.5 stars.
Probably for that last sequence because that was really good. Yeah. And it went a while because the eliminations in this match were fast, one after the other. And it seemed like they purposely did that to save some time for Snuka and Perfect to have their little mini match.
And finally, the Warriors, the Ultimate Warrior, Jim Neidhart, and the Rockers against the Heenan family, Andre, Arn, Haku, and Bobby Heenan, who replaces Tully Blanchard in this match. I thought Bobby Heenan was the MVP of this show.
I love this match. I thought Arn Anderson was the MVP of this show because this guy,
Arn Anderson's great too.
He did not dog it one bit. For his last night in the territory, he did not dog it. He went out there and essentially carried the match. There's a lot of reasons why this match is memorable. One is there's that classic promo on TV where the Warrior decides to tape up his team together with that tape when they're all like on coke or some shit, and then. Remember where the Rockers would go for high spots, the Warrior would run and push them off the turnbuckle. Like I was like, what are you doing, dude? They essentially redid the house show run with Andre and Warrior in this match because he beat them in like 30 seconds, if not less. And it's like I've said before, this is the one where The Rock did the impression of Andre being pissed off, right? This is because Andre's backing up. He's like, "Oh, what's up, what's up?" Oh, and then years later, The Rock would imitate that very spot, you know. And then so this is where it came from. So yeah, and then Jim Neidhart was out in like a minute by Haku. So
Yep.
all the guys that couldn't work, they got him out of the ring fast.
Yeah.
And then you had all the great workers. You had Arn Anderson, you had the Rockers, and they just had some great. Haku is very underrated as well when he's motivated. And they had a great wrestling match. Like the second half of this match is really good.
All right, here are the eliminations. So Warrior clotheslines Andre. I wasn't even sure if the match. I think they said that they rang the bell like really quick just so the match would start. But 27 seconds in, and Andre's out. Like you said, Haku beats Neidhart with the kick in like 3 minutes. Then he kicks Jannetty, tags in Heenan, who gets the pinfall.
Of course.
And in this match, you know, Bobby is tagging in. And then as long as he can get some quick offense, you know, he's feeling good about himself. But the second someone gets something on him, he's immediately tagging out to Arn, who just gets progressively more mad and more mad and more mad throughout this match. And so Shawn Michaels pins Haku with the flying body press off the top. Arn Anderson pins Shawn with a spine buster. And then Warrior pins Arn after the press slam. After Arn and Heenan collide. And so Heenan gets knocked off the apron. And so he doesn't realize that Arn is out of this match because the whole time he's just making sure that he's not in the ring with the Ultimate Warrior. And so Warrior sneaks up behind him, throws Heenan's in the ring, or no, throws him in the ring. And then Heenan's got to take these insane moves from the Ultimate Warrior, which did not look like fun. And the Ultimate Warrior
and he didn't talk shit about him for the rest of his life, essentially, about working with him.
Yeah, I can imagine. It looked brutal, man.
Yeah, no, this was a fun match. And one thing we haven't brought up, and we teased the Tully thing earlier, and we talked about the real life thing and what's happening behind the scenes. But on television, they explained this by saying there was dissension amongst the Heenan family, right? And so to the point where Bobby Heenan didn't accompany Rick Rude for his match, and everybody was saying, "Where's Bobby Heenan?" And Rick Rude was being vague, you know. So it turned out that there was some sort of dissension between the Brainbusters and Bobby Heenan, and Tully just decided to walk out. He took off on Bobby day of, and so it was just Arn and Bobby Heenan. But then Arn and Bobby Heenan had their breakup during the match. Where this doesn't make sense, of course, and where they messed up is that the 3 nights later, they would have the official breakup that would contradict this breakup.
Yeah.
You know, which is, that's what happens when you tape out of order.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll talk about that with Saturday night's main event. But I do want to say, for my money, the entertainment aspect of this show and the storytelling of this show was Bobby and Jesse. Like, I was just amazed at how good those guys were at their jobs. Like you said, in ring, Arn was fantastic, and just the frustration that he showed with Bobby. But man, you know, I after watching this show, the thing that I was like, man, I miss that guy. You know, I so miss that guy. And not to, you know, if he was alive today, he would be really old. He wouldn't even be in wrestling because, you know, he would be retired, and maybe he'd be talking about it in some way. But like that type of character to kind of tie the knots together on the layered storyline, that's some of the stuff that I miss about wrestling the most, is having characters like him.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm sure today he would have a podcast somewhere, maybe putting down Tony Khan like all the other guys from his generation, breaking Dave Meltzer's heart like Jim Cornette did. But anyways, yeah, he was awesome, man. It's Bobby Heenan. I mean, you appreciate him more and more the more you watch him. You know, I actually saw a compilation because, like I've been sharing with you, I had kidney stones, so I've been bedridden for the majority of the weekend. And I found a compilation on YouTube of all the primetime sketches with him and Gorilla, just edited together.
Oh wow!
And it was like an hour and a half of that, and just seeing both of those guys work together, and just the comedy, and just awesome. It was fun. It was fun to see that. You don't see that anymore.
And I mean, they had such a good friendship. You remember the Monday Nitro where Bobby had
Oh,
to
of course. Yeah,
say
he's
that he
crying.
had passed, and then even at the Bobby's Hall of Fame speech, same thing. Like, and I'm sure when the Gorilla book comes out, which I've already pre-ordered, the biography of Gorilla Monsoon, I'm sure there'll be a ton of Bobby stuff in there, which I'm
Yeah,
looking
for
forward
sure. I
to.
mean, they were bros, and till the end.
All right, let's quickly get through this Saturday night's main event, which was just 2 nights after the Thanksgiving Survivor Series show. Warrior beat Andre in a long-ish match, almost 8
This was a big
minutes.
blow off show, by the way, because this was
Yeah.
their blow off for the and it's fucked up because it was a 7-minute match. Excuse me, and all the houses were getting 27-second matches. So imagine if you went to a house show and then you're watching Saturday Night's Main Event and you see them wrestle. You're like, wait a minute, when I saw them live, they only gave me 27 seconds, and now here they're wrestling 7 minutes.
Yep. Exactly.
So that would be it for that feud.
Did I tell you about this last time where this is the Saturday night's main event show where I forgot what we had done, but I hadn't missed the Saturday night's main event since I don't think I caught all of them, but I did, like, I think in February of 86. From then on, like I was watching all of them live.
Mm-hmm.
But this was a show where I think we had done something during the day and I was really tired. And I told my mom, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to sleep for like 2 hours. Wake me up at 11:30 so I can watch this show. And she just forgot. And I literally slept through the whole night. And I didn't record the show. So I had never seen this version of Saturday Night Live all the way through until we just watched it for this show. Not that I missed a ton, by the way. But yeah, so Warrior wins by because of the interference, and Heenan grabs the belt to hit Warrior, but Warrior hits Heenan first and picks him up for the press slam, and then he heaves him at Andre after the match is over. And Dave gave it, I think this is a negative half of a star of a match for Dave.
I don't know. That's a little too rough. I think. I would give it a star. I think it was a 1 star. Because to me, anytime Andre pushes himself to give us more than he could give us at this time, I'll give him credit for that. I mean, the guy couldn't even move at this point, and he's at least in this match he tried something. Even though if the fans notice, if you guys ever go and watch a match from back then, he never leaves the ropes. He's always kind of guiding himself with the ropes. You never see him in the middle of the ring ever. He's always kind of balancing himself with the, because he can't do anything at this point anymore.
Yeah. All right. So the next match is this is an interesting match here. Why do you think Hogan loses this match to Lanny Poffo? Is it just to set up, like, you're setting up Kurt Hennig and Hogan, but it's so crazy that, like, the one time Hogan loses on Saturday Night's Main Event is to Lanny Poffo.
Because Lanny Poffo told Vince that Tully was trying to recruit everybody. No, I'm just joking. I don't know. I mean, I think it makes sense. I think we're kind of wondering why, because it's so unusual. But I think when you think about it, it makes sense. I mean, they were about to pair up the Genius and Perfect. Perfect was about to hit the road. Like you said, he already had done some shots with Hogan, so they were already introducing them. But I feel like Perfect needed all the help he could get because he's a smaller guy. He didn't have that big bulky figure that a lot of the Hogan opponents had. So this was just a way to put heat on them. They had I felt like Vince was gonna push the concept of the team against Hogan, not so much just Perfect. It was the Genius and Perfect. But I like this match because it showed all the untapped potential of Lanny Poffo. I mean, the guy could move, man. He's doing all kinds of cool stuff that we didn't see back then. He's skinning the cat to get back inside. And of course, I mean, a lot of it doesn't really age well, right? Because there's a lot of like homophobic reaction to a lot of his spots and whatnot, which is, I don't understand that. Like, only in Vince's warped mind could somebody who's like hyper intelligent, and be gay, even though it doesn't matter. That's a bad thing in his world, right? It's weird.
I used to really, really like Lanny Poffo. when he was just basically there to lose to their best heels. Like when he would have the frisbee and he'd have the promo on the frisbee and then he'd throw the frisbee out to the crowd. I always thought that was kind of cool for like an opening match guy. I was like, that's pretty cool. I wish I could catch a frisbee from Lanny Poffo. But this is really where his career does pick up steam, is doing this genius character. And he's really, really good at it. And what's interesting about that too is I remember, who was I talking to? So this you will probably think this is wacky, but Pampero Firpo's daughter, she comes and hangs out with us to watch wrestling sometimes.
Well, that I know. You've told me that before.
Yeah,
but
and
it is so wacky.
And Lanny Poffo, when her dad died, somehow she and Lanny Poffo got connected. The Savage doing the
Savage
interviews,
but
they had got connected, to have a pretty good friendship. And then Lanny dies like not that long after. So Dave and I had her on to talk about Lanny when Lanny passed. But when I think of Lanny, I think of Mary, Pampero Firpo's daughter, because she just has lots of stories about him and his kindness and just being a really good person. So it's funny.
And he was also a character, right, in real life, because he wrote his own poems, right? Like that was all him. And then one thing that got annoying, I don't know if this was him trying to keep kayfabe or not. Remember when he would do those early interviews, and I believe with Brian Alvarez as well, like he would always talk in like poetry, like he wouldn't talk like a regular person. but to his credit, he found ways to actually talk like that. Like everything.
He also had a really good voice for that kind of thing.
But everything had to rhyme, everything had to make sense in the poetry setting. But how do you do that off the cuff? That was amazing to me. But it did get annoying. I'm like, dude, just do an interview. Like you don't have to. And then I think towards the end he started talking regular, but it was years before he got to that point. But yeah, the genius, man. Yeah, you're right. That's one of those characters that as people from our generation always remember.
Yeah.
Even though the actual run was less than a year. I mean, he was around later on with the Beverly Brothers, but he wasn't pushed at all at that point,
Right.
The run that we remember started here at this night. And then it would end at WrestleMania 6, where Perfect would leave him behind, and then he would get his haircut by the bar Beefcake. And that would be it for that relationship.
All right, so how Hogan gets counted out is Mr. Perfect hits him with the belt, and later
with the hardcore title, you mean?
Yeah, Perfect is like destroying this championship, and he's breaking it. I guess live. Hogan did make his comeback live and beat up both Hennig and Poffo in front of the live crowd. And
Hogan must pose.
Did his posing routine.
Yes.
Yeah. So Dusty beats the Big Boss Man, and Dave calls it one of the worst network matches of all time.
Okay. Man, Dave was stiff, man.
Listen to this. Listen to this. This was the worst I've ever seen Rhodes look, which is saying a mouthful. Rhodes won with a totally botched up cradle from behind, and in parentheses he put, "You have to bend down to do a cradle, don't you?" As Boss Man waited for Slick to give him the nightstick, Slick was arguing at ringside with the woman who is now Dusty's manager. So this is the introduction to Sapphire. Dave also wrote later that originally Sapphire was going to be paired up with Zeus, which I find super hard to believe. Like, how?
I don't, unless, because remember the original Sapphire, and I'm just saying what it was, right? Because this is what Dusty wanted, a lady of the night, younger lady of the night. I don't know if maybe Dave's thinking whoever they had in mind for that role was going to go with Zeus, and then they switched it over to an older lady, which was Sapphire. So yeah, maybe that's where the stories got crossed.
Was she in wrestling before?
No, she was a fan. She was a fan that just wrote to WWE, and then I think she worked at The Office later on.
Okay, because that's what I thought. Because one of the observers, Dave, writes that she had some sort of history in the business, but then he doesn't write that at all. So I was wondering if he maybe had some wrong information about her.
Yeah, I think she was somebody that was working in the office who was a fan.
Another character that people will remember for that small period of time too.
Oh yeah, very small. Yeah.
Mr. Perfect beats the Red Rooster with the Perfect Plex. Too short for these two and pretty much a squash, but nothing at all wrong with the action was Dave's review. And
Yeah.
then in what we were talking about, this whole angle for the Brainbusters, all of a sudden, it's Tully and Arn back together again.
This doesn't make no sense.
And the Rockers actually win the match in 2 out of 3 falls. But then what did they do at the end? Didn't they do something at the end where Heenan was like pissed off or something?
No, it was in the middle of the fall.
Okay.
In the middle,
okay.
in the at the end of the first fall, Heenan, there's a miscommunication, and then I believe Arn gets pinned, and then remember Heenan walks away. He's like, screw you guys, and that was the official breakup. And then, but Heenan, because he's Heenan, he's like, well, maybe they'll win after I left them. So he's speaking through he's speaking through the curtain, like looking at the match. And then at the end, the Brainbusters get the second fall, and then the Rockers win the third fall. And then that's when Brain says, "I'm done with these guys," and then he just walks away.
All right, so
but they never talk about Survivor Series.
No,
they never. This show's so weird because all these like Dusty and Bossman, they never talk about how 2 nights before Bossman laid him out with the nightstick, and over here they're just wrestling a one-on-one match. They never bring up the Brainbusters deal. What else? They never bring up the Warrior Andre thing at Survivor Series. None of that. It's just like it never happened, and it was literally 3 days ago.
Yeah,
so weird. You'll never see that in today's wrestling ever.
And I wonder why they wanted to do the Survivor or the Saturday Night's Main Event so soon after Survivor Series. I wonder what the reason for that was.
I think that was Dick Ebersol. That was in their call.
Maybe, yeah.
It was whenever they found the slot in the Saturday Night Live. Whenever Saturday Night Live took a week off, that's when they inserted the show.
All right, now let's talk about the New York Knockouts Clash of Champions, and that is a very memorable show. I'm trying to remember. I definitely had this on like a VHS tape that I had recorded over. And we were talking about how Dave is bashing Troy, New York as a place to actually hold a show that you're supposed to have a nice main event. And he's making fun of the building and how it's so cold and this and that. But as a kid, I didn't think anything of it. I was like, oh, wrestling's on. New York Knockout. There's some cool graphics. I get to see Ric Flair and I get to see Terry Funk and I get to see Lex Luger. Like, I didn't even think anything of it. Like, when you rewatch this show, did you see anything that came off like JV or
no? I mean, I'm with you. You know what it was to me is that all the WCW production came off as JV anyway. Like to me, it was just like it was always dark. It was always, the mic was always off, the lighting was always off. So to me, it was just another show. I don't know why Dave was making a big deal out of this arena. Maybe he'd been there and he just saw how bad it was.
Well, I mean, he did grow up. He was actually born in Brooklyn, but he was on the West Coast, when he was a little kid. So I don't know if he really had that much experience in New York itself. So the Freebirds beat the Road Warriors via DQ, and this was for the tag team titles, even though the Freebirds had already lost their titles. They didn't even come out with the belts on this show.
Yeah.
So Dave said, cold crowd, decent pacing, but bad timing, too short, and a god-awful finish. Animals thrown over the top rope behind the ref's back. Hawk is brawling in the ring and then tosses down Tommy Young for the disqualification. And he gave it a great dud of a rating.
So Daz is doing some research for us. Do you want to read what it says on it? He's saying apparently Sapphire was involved in wrestling in St. Louis before WWF, doing a bit of wrestling and having a referee's license. So yeah, she was in.
That's kind of what Dave had written, that she had some sort of history in the business. So there you go.
Right.
But I don't know why he never followed up with that. I was like, oh, did he write this on mistake? And then
he didn't really like Dusty during this time, so maybe that was something to that.
Not at all. So what did you think about Bill Apter on this show, coming out, giving out the most popular wrestler to Sting, and then gives Ric Flair the Wrestler of the Decade award.
I don't know, man. It's like we see today with these guys that work the WWE, you know, pregame shows, even like Ariel Helwani doing stuff for them. Like, but I don't know if Bill Abner was ever credible that way or even wanted to be, right? So maybe that's a bad comparison. But if the Pro Wrestling Illustrated wanted to stay quote unquote neutral or unbiased, it certainly hurt its reputation by doing these kind of shows. But we see it now, it's more accepted. Now we see that all the time for both companies, you know?
Yeah, there's no way that Sting is more popular than Hulk Hogan at this point.
No. But I think Hogan got Wrestler of the Year, right? Or Ric Flair got it.
Ric Flair got Decade. I don't know about of the year.
Okay, because remember, if you got Wrestler of the Year, you would the consolation prize was most popular, you know, which is essentially best babyface, essentially what it was,
right?
So,
all right, Doom beat Tommy Rich and Eddie Gilbert. Dave is complaining about the lack of heat again. He said the finish saw Ron Simmons hit Tommy Rich with a clothesline off the middle rope, and Reed had held him up for the move, but he also commended the action and the pacing. So I'm assuming for Tommy Rich and Eddie Gilbert, because he did not like Doom as a tag team.
No, he also does. He ain't even gonna play along with saying Doom 1 and Doom 2.
Yeah,
he's just saying Ron Simmons.
Exactly. Cornette interviews the Steiners. They named the Frankensteiner, which Dave, we talked about last time. Dave had called the Raul Mata head scissors.
Yes.
And so we have a move for the name, which is now called the Frankensteiner. Did you ever hear Scott say how he came up with the move? Like what inspired him? I don't know if I've ever seen him talk about it.
Me neither. No, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, Frankenstein, the Frankensteiner, you know, it makes sense. But I've never heard him talk about how he came up with the name.
Yeah, like who inspired it or what he saw that made him do it.
I guarantee you now in the 2024 Scott Steiner doesn't even remember. I guarantee you. He'll just make something up, you know?
Yeah, there's no way. The Midnight Express beat the Dynamic Dudes. So in this match, Cornette was in the middle. He was neutral. And of course, this was the heel turn on the Dynamic Dudes, which was really well done. And Bobby Eaton pulls out a chain. Shane Douglas backdrops him, and he drops the chain. Cornette grabs the chain and then pops Douglas from behind with the racket, throws the chain out, and then hits Douglas with the racket to show that he is still with the Midnights. At this point, though, I wonder if it would have worked better if the dudes were still over, because the crowd was they're just out on these poor guys.
No, what I think it was, I think this angle worked so well because everybody hated the dudes.
Sure.
But
the surprise element is not as big of a deal. But yeah, you're probably right.
No, but I think it worked in turning the Midnights baby faces. The pop when Cornette chooses the Midnights over the dudes was huge because everybody hated the dudes. We're all waiting for that moment, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, dude, just choose the Midnights because the dudes suck.
Yeah,
you know. Yeah. And once he finally did that, it was like it got over huge. So had the dudes been over as baby faces, yeah, maybe there would have been a little more drama, but I don't know if the pop would have been the same. You know, I like this angle. This is one of my favorite angles of '89. It went for a couple months.
Yeah, it's a really good one. Dr. Death pins the Super Destroyer, who is Jack Victory. Originally, he was supposed to face the Cuban Assassin, and Tom Zank was supposed to face the Super Destroyer, who was supposed to be Bill Irwin. But I forgot what happened. Like
it's a big old calamity of situations one after another. But this is typical WCW. How come WWF never had this problem?
Yeah,
you had WWF, who had a bunch of guys that were coked up and drunk, and they always made their shots, right? Always made their shots. In WCW, you had guys whose cars broke down, whose family members died, who missed their flight, and here was one after the other, right? And so they just called Jack Victor. It's like, you're going to be another mass wrestler out of the 100 you've been this year already. So good luck. So yeah, so that's what happened. But you're right. There was a whole line of guys that were supposed to come in before Jack Victory, and they all fell through the wayside, you know.
And just because it was, they needed something. They needed, something fun to happen. Norman the Lunatic is dressed as Santa Claus, even though it's still November, and he gives Dr. Death a teddy bear. And
No. Let me interrupt you really quick. Again, to go with what I was saying. So we're having all these guys fall to the wayside because something or other, right?
Yeah.
Dave says it very clearly. Norman the Lunatic, the guy, he was just hanging out there backstage.
Yeah.
So it's like, out of all the guys that are supposed to be there and don't make their shot, then you have a guy who's not supposed to be there, who's just hanging out. That's WCW in a nutshell for you right there, man. And so, yeah, once they saw him there, like, let's get him out there. Let have him do something.
I just assumed Dr. Death was just going to kill this dude, but no, he just celebrated with him. I guess he can't kill Santa Claus.
You can't kill him. That's instant heel hit, especially at that time.
All right. Rick Steiner and Scott Steiner beat the Skyscrapers by DQ when Doom did a run-in. Now, this was really well done because what they're doing is they're selling this Iron Man tournament, and they're doing so with this match. Now, there's not going to be a finish necessarily, but they have the end of the match being where all four teams are just in the ring together fighting each other, which was kind of cool. And I was like, wow, I really want to see this tournament now. Then the Skyscrapers are not going to be in it, but this was well done if you're building towards Starcade.
Yeah, no, I liked it too. Perfect.
What'd you think about Nitron?
Another stiff in the business, man.
Who is that guy? Did he do anything else?
I think that was it for him. Nitron came and went, But this guy was even worse than everyone else because he just walking, you could tell he was very awkward and uncoordinated, right? Like, he would walk kind of like a robot. Maybe that was his gimmick. I don't know. Maybe it was Nitron, the robot. But he would walk like, I'm like, bro, when you have to be athletic in that ring, how are you gonna navigate that? Because you're not showing me anything, just walking to the ring. And then he was gone pretty soon after this. He didn't really do much.
Dave also had to mention that this isn't El Gigante, who he was talking about earlier.
That's right.
He had to mention that. All right, Lex Luger.
But he wouldn't be any better, though. Let's be real about it. So,
well, Lex Luger beat Brian Pillman in another really good match between these two guys. Lex is just on fire in this match, and Pillman does a great job as an underdog babyface who the fans really, really, really want to win, but he keeps coming up short for whatever reason. And I don't know, man. Lex is this is maybe the best I've ever seen Lex.
No, this is the best. I dare anybody to tell me what year other than '89 he was better as a worker than this. There wasn't.
So Dave gave this 3 3/4 stars. Sting actually does come in to make the save because Luger hits Pillman in the back with the chair before putting him in the torture rack after he had already won the match. Finally,
let me interrupt you right there because I did some research right now as you were talking. So it was Tyler Mane. So Nitron was Tyler Mane. I always thought Tyler Mane was Big Sky, who teamed with Diesel with Kevin Nash, but it was Nitron.
You're talking about Master Blasters?
No. Big Sky was another. That was one of the right after the Master Blasters.
Okay,
because the Master Blasters was Al Green and Kevin Nash.
Right.
Right after that, there was a guy called Big Sky who came in and teamed with Vinny Vegas for a while. But this guy Nitron was Tyler Mane, who's actually an actor now, a stunt guy. He was in the X-Men movies. He's worked a lot with Rob Zombie. He was one of the Michael Myers. He was Rob Zombie's Michael Myers with that big 7-foot Michael Myers. So I was, okay, so that's who it was. So this guy, he made something of himself. It's Tyler Mane.
One of the more famous matches of our childhood, Ric Flair against Terry Funk, I Quit. Dave gives this 5 stars right off the bat. He says it's just a one of a kind match, and I will always remember when Funk finally does say I quit, and Gary Hart just being so mad, like just being so upset that this dude quit, like just that whole dynamic, and then chaos after the match happens. Gary Hart tries to stop Funk, who shakes Flair's hand because that was part of the deal.
Right.
Is
Yeah.
you got to shake the winner's hand, and then Gary Hart attacks Funk. What do you think about Gary Hart, like never ever taking a bump? Like even when he gets punched, he just falls into the ropes every single time.
Yeah, and I remember there was a reason for that because they asked him that, and he I forget what the reason was, but yeah, he would never take a bump, and which kind of made him a bad manager, right? I mean, it made him ineffective because compare him to like all the WWF managers. How many times did we see Jimmy Hart get thrown around, or Slick, or Bobby Heenan? That was the job of the manager. I mean, the way that I was brought up, it was like, after the match, they take the heat for the baby face. So, but Gary Hart wouldn't do it.
Mm-mm.
And remember, he always had a blade in his pocket for the rest of his life. He had a blade. What was his saying? He says, "It's better to have one and not need one than to need one and not have one."
Have
So
you ever read that book?
No, it's hard. That's one of the big. It's hard to find and it's expensive.
So somebody sent me an ebook version, and he says it's the real version, but I haven't read it yet just because I have so many other books. But I
Right.
don't want to read it and then realize that it's not like the final version that
Well,
got
why would
pulled
you
off
think
the
that it's not the
shelves.
real version?
Because there's like a multiple versions of the book. Like Court Bauer says, like there's like sanitized versions of the book that are out there.
Wow. Okay. Because Court Bauer had the original manuscript because they were boys.
Yeah.
So maybe he's just talking about there's the version that he has, which he would have the unedited one, right? And then there's the one that came out, and that's the one we all get to read. So I don't know. I didn't know there was more than 2 versions out there.
I have to ask my buddy who sent it to me just to double check. Okay, so Flair and Sting, and so again they're setting up the Starcade Iron Man tournament. Mr. J comes out, who is Kendo Nagasaki. Will have a bunch of different names. Dragon
Names,
Master.
yeah.
And Sting does a run in, Muta does a run in, and then Lex kind of comes in and hits Sting with the chair, hits Flair with a chair, and then he goes and breaks their trophies at the end to signify, I'm supposed to be the wrestler of the year, not you guys.
Right.
In the show. Yeah,
Yeah,
very
yeah.
memorable clash.
Yes, no, one of my favorite matches as a kid, and also the ending of it is the continuation of Halloween Havoc's ending, right? So
Yeah.
so it's all connected. It's all coming together. And yeah, very memorable clash for sure.
All right, we will finish off our 1989 run with for Observe This with the Starcade Future Shock. When I was younger, I rented this video several times. And I remember watching it the first time and being a little disappointed not because of what happened, but more just because everything seemed so rushed and nothing seemed that important. And then I would always, because everyone would say, oh, this is kind of like a underrated classic because of the work and the matches. And I always rented it with the idea of like, okay, what am I missing about this show? There's something that I'm missing. It's better than I think it is. Like, people keep telling me and, all the magazines and everything. But I always feel sort of let down every time I watch the show. But you just said earlier that you really, really like the show, from the production to the wrestling. Like, what is it exactly that makes you have fond memories of this one?
Well, first of all, you're having all of at that time, my favorites were gonna be on one match, right? Or one tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I just like the fluidity of it. Like I think it flows well. For having 12 matches, it never seems bloated. And the second half, they actually give time to the matches. I like how it's paced. I think it's well paced. And again, yeah, I think the work is very, very good in this match. Not all of them, not all the matches are great. I think the Steiners and the Road Warriors is a big disappointment, which we'll get to. And that's the one that I think about, like, oh my God, But anytime you have Sting and Flair, Sting, and any combination of Sting, Luger, Sting, Flair, Flair, Luger, etc., those guys are always going to bring it, especially at that time because they were wrestling so frequently, especially in '88. So this is just one of those shows that I see through rose-colored glasses. You know.
Did you think that the times were as gimmicked as they were when you watched it?
No, I just learned. I just learned that last night when I was reading the Observer. Like literally, it had never hit me, and I'm usually a mark for that stuff. You know, I look up. I never even realized that they were being shaved that much.
Well, in some cases, or in most of the cases, they were shaved. But for whatever reason, in the Lex and Rick match, they actually added like 2 minutes to the thing, which was kind of funny. All right, let's go through the matches here. So the show opens.
I love the show opening.
They do these. They bring out all of the teams, and they kind of stand on the stage, and they announce all the teams before the first match.
Very. You know what that reminded me of, right? Which you know is gonna always bring a smile to my face.
What?
The prime era of Pride Fighting Championships.
Oh yeah. Totally.
You know, where they would have all the guys, and then the tournament. Love that. I miss that era.
Did they do that at the Starcade 90 tag team tournament as well? Do you remember?
Yeah, they did. Yes,
okay.
I remember. Yeah, Rey Mysteric. That's what they kept on calling Rey Mysterio Senior. Very disrespectful.
And Conan on the same team, right?
Yeah. But they didn't even learn Rey Mysterio's real name. They didn't even respect him. They just called him Rey Mysteric. But and it had the Russians, which was wacky.
Yeah.
It was. Well, maybe one day we'll talk about that show. But anyway, with this show, I mean, I never got to ask you. I thought the production was second to none. I thought it was amazing. I thought the entryway from this show, you could put it in today's show and it would still get over.
But the thing that does stand out is because if you watched their TV back then, their main house show was the Omni. So this is held at the Omni.
Yeah.
So this is the main place that they did all the house shows. So I remember when I heard that this show was at the Omni, I was like, wait, that's the place where they all just have their normal house shows. Like, what's so special about that? But the other thing about that, there's a lot of empty seats in this crowd, man.
Yes.
On a Wednesday night or whatever they did it. They did the show. You could very much see the empty crowd, and so it didn't seem like the place to be necessarily.
So people have to understand that TK is not the only one with empty seats.
Oh, absolutely.
We've been seeing that for 20, 30 years now, 35 years.
Hard. It's hard to bring tons of people to wrestling shows constantly, man.
On a Wednesday night, because it's the middle of the week. People got to work. But yeah, and I know that Dave was blaming the tournament portion of this or being promoted as a tournament because he was saying that they were putting in 10,000 just on a house show with a promoted main event. And here as a pay-per-view, they only got 6,000. I think that was the final attendance, 7,000, I forget. But it was less than when they were doing as a house show. So that was something. And I know that Cornette and Ross try to cover it up by saying the classic excuse of like, oh, there's a traffic backup right now. Corny started saying that they were buying Midnight Express merchandise in the lobby, and that's why the fans, all the empty seats. So they played up. They played up the fact that there was a lot of empty seats. But I thought the crowd he was pretty good throughout the show, though. I thought it
especially when you have to see every single team or wrestler 3 times.
Right. And I know another thing that Dave speculated was how much not having some of the other guys would hurt the show, right? No Freebirds, no Midnights. There was a lot of people that were not going to be on the show. And I thought for an experiment, a one-time thing, maybe I wouldn't have done it at Starrcade because that should be a big blow-off show.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a good idea that it was worth trying once, and so I'm glad it happened.
Yeah, but the other thing is you blow off Flair and Funk the month before. What do you have? Like, you're not going to do Flair and Muta because.
Well, you could have.
You could have. That would have been a great action match, but Muta is not the heel that the crowd is too crazy over.
Well, I'm pissed. Well, I'll have a lot to say about Muta and the way they treated him on this show because if this happened today, the internet would be so pissed off if one of the big 2 companies treated somebody that was as over as Muta the way he was treated on this show.
Also, as a relation to this, him and Flair were one of the rumored matches for the Tokyo Dome, and he said no because of how he was treated, how he was booked in this Starcade match. Like, he didn't want to wrestle Flair again because he didn't think there was going to be much heat to it after everyone just saw him lose all these matches.
Right, right. And I think this started the big thing where he just wanted to leave. He wanted to go back to Japan and just become a legend in Japan, which he did. Yeah, this started to sour him on WCW, this event right here.
All right, let's get through these matches. Rick and Scott beat Doom via countout in 12:24. Dave said they shaved about 2 minutes and 30 seconds off the real time. They're doing lots of stuff at the outside, and Rick, who's supposed to be the dumb one, sneaks into the ring to beat the count. So the Steiners get their first victory. And we should say the scoring system, you would actually get more points for a pinfall win than you would for a DQ or a countout win. You would get 0 points for a loss, and you would get
5 points
for a draw. So
yeah,
which plays into the main event, because I was thinking, like, if you're Rick and you're facing Sting, if you draw, don't you tie Lex at the end?
I think so. Yeah.
So but they didn't really talk about that. So it didn't seem like they were going there. Okay,
I'm surprised they were even able to pull off this kind of arithmetic that you need to pull off this tournament with the way with how clumsy WCW was at this time.
Yeah, like thinking that they're going to screw something up.
Yeah.
So the opener for the singles is Lex and Sting, and Lex actually pins Sting in this match. I guess they shave. Dave says this was like the most embarrassing of the shaved time spots, but I thought the most embarrassing thing here is Lex is supposed to pin Sting with his foot on the rope, and Sting's got a shoulder up. He kicks out, and the ref still counts the 3, so it looks really silly. And so I wonder what the miscommunication was there, because by the time, the real time clock, they were getting close to the end, so Sting must have thought there was one spot left coming for him to.
That's what I thought happened. Yeah, I think because of the whole shaving thing, because and again, this is WCW. We can't put it past them how clumsy they are. For all we know, all the boys thought that they were shoot times, right? Okay, we got 15 minutes, we got 20 minutes. While they're working, as they're shaving the time, they're telling them that they're shaving the time. It's not like WWE does it with this elimination chambers where the shave time is part of the match, right? Because that's how they do it, because everything is timed perfectly. In this particular situation, it's more like we're shaving time as a shoot, you know. And so I'm assuming that it was like, yo, you guys got to go home, and then Lex like, let me hit the ropes, I'll scoop of you, and then that's where the miscommunication happened.
Yeah. So the next tag match is Road Warriors, and they beat Doom. And Dave mentions that woman is changing dresses for every match, very similar to Elizabeth at the 1985 Wrestling Classic in Chicago, where Randy Savage wrestled 4 times.
That's another thing that Dave does is he loves to bury those Trump Plaza WrestleManias, man. He will not bring them up. He could have easily said from that WrestleMania as well, but she did the same thing,
right?
But it's like, in Dave's mind, it's like, nope, those shows are never existed.
They called the 5-minute time at 2 minutes and 45 seconds. So Hawk gave Animal the hot tag, and Reed is about to pick up Animal for a pile driver, but Animal ducks and Hawk clotheslines Reed from the top rope, and Animal got on top for the pin. If this was a Survivor Series in WWE, Hawk and Animal would have got disqualified in that match.
Yes.
So the Road Warriors get their win, and they move on. Ric Flair beats a Great Muta in less than 2 minutes, which was a little bit of a change-up because you have all these long matches and you know the pace. So this is a bit of a surprise. But at the same time, for like you said, for like the hardcore wrestling fans, this is the one that they wanted to see go a long period of time. They wanted to see Muta do his super athletic stuff. But no, Rick pins him with a cradle in less than 2 minutes.
I don't blame Keiji Muto for being pissed. This is a travesty of justice here. Like, how do you get over for a year? I think this was also the end of Muta's undefeated streak, right? Barring tag matches at the Thunderdome and all that, or Thunder Cage and all that. No, he had lost to Sting. Never mind.
I think he had also lost to Rick on television because they were doing like TV matches between the two of them.
That's right.
At this point, but it may have been disqualification. It may not have been.
But he was very protected. He was very protected. And this is the same thing as if on Raw this Monday, like Jacob Fatu and Roman Reigns wrestle and he beats him in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, it's like it was such a mind fuck to me then as a kid. Like, what's happening here? Like, what just happened? Like, this is a great Muta, And to me that's what's not talked about enough. Like, what a horrible decision.
Well, he was clearly not in their plans, right?
He wasn't
full steam ahead with Sting and Lex.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like this is a guy that got organically over for you guys. Here's a made star that's more valuable than these manufactured stars, right? Because they were created organically by the fan base.
You could bring him back from time to time, and he comes in as a star. Yeah, you're totally right.
Or sign him to stay through 90, and build, have him as a heel. Now all of a sudden, him and Sting are wrestling for the world title. But no, let's put Flair over the almost 50-year-old guy, who like we're trying to put to pasture anyway. And yeah, I hated this match. I still hate this match. And it had Gaga from the outside, and it just bad start for Muta, and it wouldn't get better.
All right, so the Steiners beat the Road Warriors in the match that we were talking about, and this has the famous babyface finish where you do the double pin on the back suplex, and one of the guys gets the shoulder up. This is a very common way for the Road Warriors to lose a match,
right?
If they are to lose a match, and yeah, like this is where Cornette's like trying to explain to the TV audience why there's no heat. Because they don't want anyone to lose. They just want to cheer moves.
He can't say babyface or heel, so he's got to skittle his way around it.
Yeah.
Did we just see this finish on one of the two shows? It's trying for whatever reason. I think there was a big match that just had the same like last minute, but I don't know. Part of me wants to say this finish hasn't been used in a long time because it's a dumb finish when you think about it. But I think we just saw it recently. Anyways, if anybody out there that's listening could remember, put it on the chat.
On current wrestling today.
Yeah, I think we just saw a finish like this, but it doesn't ring. I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm trying to think too. I can't remember. All right, so then Sting pins Muta with a superplex, which is kind of an interesting fall because it's rare to see Sting do that move, and it's rare to see somebody actually lose to that move. I guess Barry Windham would have pinned some guys. Maybe Cowboy Bob Orton would have pinned some guys with that move. So it's kind of it came a little bit out of nowhere for the fall. And then the new Wild Samoans, so weird because some teams had wrestled twice already, and they hadn't even wrestled yet.
But they did say that it was the luck of the draw, though. These were supposedly drawn out of a hat.
Yeah, the luck of the draw, and then you get Flair and Sting in the main event. Sure. So the new Wild Samoans, they beat Doom in 8:22. They tried to explain why these guys are in the match because the whole time they're building towards the skyscrapers, and Jim Cornette said it was a last-minute injury. He wasn't sure of the severity, and the Samoans got the nod to come in. And then Ross followed by saying that Sid was injured, and it was touch and go. But I don't remember. Did they say why one of the Samoans left? I don't remember if they did or not.
No, but that's why they were called the new Wild Samoans.
Yeah.
They never said that why the other one left or yeah, because the big question was, it's not like there were so many other teams that were better than, or not better, but deserved to be in there, right? And it's like, why the Wild Samoans? It's like, why not the Midnights? Right? Why not the Freebirds? who have more credibility. It's kind of like what happened with
I think Jimmy Jam had gotten in trouble or something. David hinted towards Jimmy Jam maybe being sent home, but he didn't say why, or he was like alluding to like there's probably a reason, but we're not sure yet.
Sometimes it's just like, who do you have on the Rolodex? Just call them. You know, we're not, because it's like what happened this year with when Juice Robinson went down, right? With Commander, it's like there's no rhyme or reason. Even though there's other wrestlers that should be in the tournament, fuck it, let's just throw them in there and hope nobody brings it up, you know. And so I think this was the same situation here. It's like, let's just put the Wild Samoans in there because we don't want to bury the Freebirds, we don't want to bury the Midnights.
I wonder if Cornette just said no, I don't want them to be in there if they're just gonna lose all these matches. I wonder.
Yeah, I'm sure he might have. I wouldn't be surprised.
So the finish,
you can't have Jack Victory come out at the same time wearing two hoods. So
the Super Destroyers, Jack Victory and Bill Irwin together.
Yeah.
Fatu and Butch Reed, they bump heads. Reed flies out and Fatu hits the ropes, and then Oliver Humperdinck pushes Fatu. Oh no, actually, Butch Reed doesn't fly out of the ropes; he just goes down. Pushes Fatu on top of Reed. So I guess Fatu maybe has the harder head in this match.
Yes.
And Dave said 3 stars for the work, but because the fans didn't care, 2 stars for the match.
And then we haven't even talked about the Big Kahuna, which was a dumb gimmick.
Oliver Humperdinck.
Yeah.
I would have seen Humperdinck first with Bigelow, I think, in '87.
Me
I think
too.
that's the time I've seen him first.
Yeah. But I mean, why didn't they just hire Captain Lou Albano if they wanted a Lou Albano clone? Like, he's doing a Lou Albano impersonation.
Well, I guess around this time, what is Lou Albano doing? Like trashing WWF?
He's losing his mind on Donahue and you know, all those talk shows from back in the day.
So Flair Luger, they go to a time limit draw, but like I said, they added minutes, and it was actually a 17-minute match, not a 15-minute match. I thought it was good, but I was wondering about the psychology of the match because Lex is technically the heel in this match. Rick is the babyface, yet Rick is wrestling this match as if he's the heel and Lex is the babyface because all Lex does is sell his leg the entire time.
Well, here's the thing. Let's remember this, Garrett. It's like, remember, these guys went around the horn in '88 with those roles.
Absolutely.
So I'm thinking,
absolutely,
these guys, their go-to match is for Flair to be the heel and Luger to be the babyface. So they're like, fuck it, let's just have our match that we had 1,000 times a year ago, you know. So I think it was just that. It was just like they just had their basic match.
Because I think what would have been, now again, this is hindsight, Monday morning quarterbacking, like you said. If you have Flair as the babyface and Luger attacking the back the entire time, and Flair selling the back, and then Flair doing the babyface comeback and getting the figure 4 on Lex as time expired, I think the fans go crazier for the match. Lex looks more like a badass than as a babyface who is selling. And then it sets up what Rick and Sting have to do later, where Rick actually has to turn heel against Sting in the match at some point. I think it makes that even bigger. So as I was watching, I was like, I wonder why they did the psychology that way. But you're probably right. It's just the comfortable match that they've done 1,000 times.
Right. Yeah. So that's why the psychology was weird.
So Steiners and the Samoans, and Steiners get disqualified here. Talk about the laziest disqualification. And this was, even when I was a kid, I hated this about wrestling, where you can see the referee, and what the announcers would say is the referee is losing the match. You know, they're losing control of the match.
Right.
And so the referee's like just kind of walking around and he's pointing, but he's not like yelling at guys, telling them like, you guys better stop, or I'm going to DQ you. He's just like walking around and pointing, and then randomly just goes, ring the bell, and he disqualifies the Steiners. And I was just like, this is some of the dumbest stuff I used to hate about wrestling.
It just makes me laugh because it's so cartoony, you know. It's like
so bad.
It doesn't make sense.
And you have these guys wrestle for, I don't know what I think there was only like maybe a minute shaved off of real time, but these guys almost go all the way to the end. And so you get that cheap DQ and you don't get a real finish to the match, like, why don't you just do it sooner? Like, why do you have to go all the way to the end?
Well, that's the old Brian Alvarez pet peeve, right? Where they wrestle 20 minutes and then it's a DQ, and it's like, don't make me sit here. Like, if you're gonna have a fuck finish, let's go 5 minutes. Don't make me sit here 20 minutes.
The heat is not on the wrestlers; it's actually on the fans who are just so mad.
Yes.
So Lex beats Muta. Muta and another one.
Another DQ.
Another
DQ.
just like randomly at 12 minutes, Muta blows the mist in his face, like for whatever reason, like it just random. So
maybe he knew he was out of the tournament. He got nothing to lose. He's like, fuck it, let me blind this guy and ruin his chances at winning this thing.
And then the last tag match was the Road Warriors and the Samoans. Steiner's had 35 points. The Samoans had 30. Road Warriors had 20, and Doom had zip.
Now here's the thing: the Samoans, you could say they lucked out in the drop, but they really didn't, because they were back heavy.
Yeah,
they had to come out quite a few times at the end. So if this was a shoot, they actually got fucked over on the draw.
Yeah. So of course the Road Warriors win this match and they get the 20 points, so they get to 40, and the Steiners are second with 45. So they win the match. Short match. Crowd really did not care less. And this was interesting because you would think that if you really, really wanted, if you wanted, I guess this is where you would have, if you would have had the Midnight Express in the match, then you maybe could have got some heat for the finish. But because no one cared about the Samoans, it was like a lame duck finish that the Road Warriors just win the match in 5 minutes and they win the prestigious thing. They didn't really sell it until the very end of the show, where they got to do like a little minute and a half interview, but it felt like dead, right? Like they win the match. Yeah. Fans should have been fired up. Oh, Road Warriors win this Iron Man tournament. They're like, who cares?
But to be fair, they would have defeated the Skyscrapers who were feuding with them at the time.
Yeah. So that would have been better for sure. And then in the last match, Rick and Sting, really good match. I still think, again, in hindsight, Monday morning quarterbacking, I still think Lex should have won this tournament.
Yes, I agree with you. For just through 89 eyes, Luger was the guy. He was ready. You know,
Terry Funk was rooting for Lex the entire time and saying that this was his guy. And he was right. It was Luger. Luger was next. And even in this match, there's some moments where Sting kind of gets a little bit of deer in headlights, where you're like, haven't you wrestled Rick like a million times as well? But, Rick keeps this match together. He goes to the figure 4 at the last second to try and win the match. And that's when Sting cradles him to win. And then, so Lex is down. So it would have been Lex had 35. Muta had 0, Flair had 25, Sting had 20. So it's the same exact point system, except for Rick had a few points less than the Samoan. So in actuality, this was smart wrestling or smart booking, because if Rick goes to the draw, Lex wins. So Rick was going for the finish because he wanted to win, which sets him up to get cradled by Sting to lose the match. So that was really smart.
That was pretty. That's probably Ric Flair's influence in the booking committee came up with that.
So they don't even get, by the time they get off the air, Sting doesn't even have a chance to talk. You only hear Sting talk through the credits. As the credits are rolling, you get to hear Sting cut his promo. So another WCW faux pas from those days.
No, and then like, as much as I put over the production, the staging was great. What about sometimes they wouldn't even put on the ring entrances? Like it's like they just come out. Sometimes they would just already be in the ring. So there was still a lot to learn. The learning curve was still happening for WCW and their production crew. You know, whereas WWF, they had this thing pat by this point. They just knew what to do. You know. But yeah, I don't know. I'm very nostalgic for this show. I've always had a good time watching. It's an easy watch for me. You know.
All right, so we got through 89. Do you have any major takeaways before we get out of here and we go and celebrate Christmas with our families?
Yeah, it's just, to me, 89 is very representative of the cyclical nature of the business. Not only when it comes to the financial aspect of it, but just, when it comes to news and all that. Because to me, this is kind of replaying nowadays with AEW and WWE, right? I mean, there's so many similarities. You see it time and time again. So that's kind of the thing that really stood out to me, just how much at times incompetence there is in these companies, how much stuff isn't their fault. It's hard when you're trying to fight a juggernaut like the WWE is at this time. And let's just hope that the AEW of 2025 is not going to be the WCW of 1990.
Oh man,
that wouldn't help anyone. But the finances are different, so it's not going to really matter. Yeah, and then I'm really nostalgic for 89. I like 89 quite a bit for both companies. Rewatching the Steamboat Flair trifecta was awesome.
Yeah,
to revisit it.
Holds up.
Yeah, it really does. The Funk feud was awesome to watch again. Getting to watch, the whole no holds barred fiasco play out for the first time. I had information as far as the box office and all that.
Yeah.
So it was fun to do this, and I'm glad that me and you were able to hang out for a whole year. We made it through. And so next year we're gonna tackle 1984, which is gonna be, like you said, is gonna be a different structure.
My main hope as we go through 1984 is while we're going through 1984, the Dodgers don't win the World Series again. That is my big hope.
I don't think that's what I think. Yeah, we're gonna be in the upper echelon for a long time.
You're gonna be back right in the mix. I've already on my Thompson to Clark podcast. I already wished for gout for Blake Snell. I wished him gout for this upcoming year.
That's horrible.
Hey, but it's not bad. Like gout, you can overcome gout. It's like not like it's not a long time illness.
Yeah. Plus we're going with a 6-man rotation, so we'll be all right.
Oh, if you guys get Sasaki, I'm gonna wish him gout too. That's my worst nightmare. But no, to be serious, I think my favorite thing, obviously talking to you, because this is kind of our check-in about wrestling. Like we don't really talk too much during the off time. So talking to you about current and this stuff has been a blast. But like you said, the comparisons, it actually helped me put the AEW stuff into context a little bit better as I'm doing Wrestling Observer Radio with Dave. And it's not apples to apples because, Tony Khan, he's just rich and doesn't have the same, it's not the same risk as Ted Turner, who's got this other giant business and wrestling is his side thing.
Mm-hmm.
Tony Khan's like, look, I can figure out how, if we're even, I'm good because who cares? I have a lot of money. But he actually took advantage of the landscape of today and is able to make money off of his company. So AEW, from the business perspective, is like light years ahead of WCW 1989, where the popularity, I think, is probably very similar to where WWF and WCW were. But just the business end of it, AEW is in a so much better spot than
well, I would also say that because of the way television has changed, WCW in 89 was maybe a little more popular than AEW, numbers wise, as far as
wrestling mainstream popularity bit bigger for both companies back then, for sure.
Because if in 89, if Luger and Sting are walking down the airport, people are gonna know who they are. Whereas, if you have who would be from AEW, like, well, I mean, like Swerve, right? There's a lot of people that probably wouldn't know who Swerve is.
Yeah.
MJF, maybe they probably wouldn't know. So I don't know. I think WCW was a little more popular in 89, but AEW financially is a lot better. They're profitable, so they're financially a lot better than WCW was.
Yeah, and we'll see, what happens, because like I already feel it. I feel like there's too much wrestling for me to keep up with. And so I got to pick and choose a lot more. I'm not going to be willing to watch as much stuff that, maybe like someone says, hey, go check out this match. I'm like, I don't want to watch any more matches. Like I see so many,
Right.
So we'll see how that shapes things, because they're going to drop Rampage. They have more.
Well, we weren't watching Rampage anyway, so
yeah, not really. But they're adding some visibility with Max and being on the streaming stuff. WWE going to Netflix is going to be super interesting, And like that stuff is interesting to me, just sort of the mechanics of how both companies are taking advantage of their opportunities. Like that's the interesting thing to me, even if I'm not, wrestling is really good, but sometimes when all the wrestling is good, like everything is just normalized to me. Like, the top, what's the top level of what we see today? I don't know. I feel like sometimes, when I watch some of the stuff of yesteryear, it's just so much more memorable, but that's because I didn't watch 7 hours of wrestling a week. I was watching 2 and half of it was promos. So it's just a
Right.
different time. And
Yeah.
and you have to have that context as well.
Yeah, and like you're right. And for example, with me, I mean, much like Terry Funk, I always say that I'm gonna retire from going to live, arena shows. But I have all the big companies coming over the first quarter of the year.
Are you going to the Intuit?
No, that's too expensive. And those beats are $200, man. I can't justify that.
That's crazy.
Maybe if I get lucky day of, I'm still gonna see day of, see if some of the scalpers want to unload. Which that's becoming the thing, right? That's the strategy for anybody that could do that. So to me, it's like day of, I'm gonna check because I don't work that far away from the Intuit Dome. So if I get me a ticket, I'll go for 100, right? If I get me, I'll go check it out because I do want to see what the big thing's gonna be about.
Yeah.
Is the new format? How are they gonna time the commercials? All that stuff. I would like to be there for that, but right now I'm not planning to. However, I do have AEW coming into the crypto.
Yep.
In March, and I have a connection to get into the crypto, so I don't worry about that. Then I have TNA coming into the Galen Center, which is where USC plays their basketball, which is a 10,000 seater, which is gonna be wacky because it's TNA. I don't know how much is gonna tarp that off. So I'm gonna go to that. There's MLW coming over. So yeah, there's all these companies that are gonna come over. New Japan has pretty much their routine stop here in Long Beach.
Yep.
So I'm still gonna go to shows. I didn't want to, but these are just it's wrestling, and it's at this point because WWE is so expensive. Like I gotta go to the alternative, like where can I get my live wrestling where I don't have to sacrifice my firstborn, essentially. So yeah, and then I'm still thinking of WrestleMania if I get lucky with a night like you if we get a nice little price decrease towards the end there. But yeah, so I'm gonna go to I foresee myself going to quite a bit of live wrestling in the first quarter of next year.
It's good.
But as far as watching the programming, I mean, SmackDown's gonna be tough because
3 hours.
Even though I'm old, I still have a social life on Fridays. Not as frequent as it used to be, but I still go out. I can't justify like watching 3 hours on a Friday night. That's too much, even for me. And I love this stuff. So that's gonna affect the product. I think that's 6 hours of just Raw and SmackDown.
Yep.
When we were kids, if it did get to 6 hours, which it never did, that was during that period when all the territories were aligning and you got all the channels for like WCCW and Memphis and all this stuff, which was rare. But even then, it was probably like 4 hours of programming. For just 2 shows of WWE, you have to invest 6 hours starting next year. That's too much. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I do see WWE cooling down.
I think so too. A little bit, at least a little bit.
Only because it's already reflecting on the ticket sales and the TV ratings. I mean, we talked earlier, Saturday Night's Main Event was a big flop, in my opinion, even though I really liked the show. But we don't know what kind of boost John Cena is going to give it.
I think he may limit the visibility of the cooling off because of this run, which is really smart, right? And you always can go back to The Rock when you need to go back to The Rock. We'll see the Roman thing. It's going to be super interesting. And I just hope that AEW can find something that really gets the wrestling zeitgeist as well, because, there's always going to be AEW folks who, swear to themselves that this thing is really cool and hot. And I'm like, okay, I get it. You just love AEW. But, yeah, so
I'm gonna switch that question around a little bit, even though it's the same. Even though it should have the same answer. I'm not hoping that AEW gets hot. I'm hoping that Tony Khan realizes he needs to get AEW hot. There's a big difference in that question. And so I think right now what's happening is that he doesn't really, not that he doesn't care, but he doesn't really, he just got the new contract. In his mind, this is going how it should go.
And he's if he says that it's not hot, then he's got to look in the mirror and say that he's the reason why it's not hot, because he runs the whole shebang.
Right.
And
So
I know a lot of
people
people want to blame the influences and, oh, you know, thank God Jimmy Jacobs is gone. Like Tony Khan said, he's the guy. Everything runs through him. So if Vince McMahon is the reason why stuff was bad, no matter how many writing teams there were, then Tony Khan's got to be the reason why things are bad.
And that's all corporate America. That's all companies. I mean, it's like your top guy is the one that's gonna take the credit and is gonna take the hits. I mean, it is what it is. But so hopefully that time comes, you know, because right now I don't even see it. I was thinking about the other day, who could headline in July, which is a show that I'm also going to, by the way. I forgot to bring that. I want to go to Dallas.
I'm definitely going to try myself.
Right. And but I'm thinking, what is going to be the big match for that show? And there isn't any. I can't think of one. You know, one that's going to be like, oh my God, this is a stadium level main event. They don't have one. You know, unless somehow they get that big Sting level baby face that's going to dethrone the Death Riders.
We'll see what happens with Kenny Omega.
That would be cool. I mean, if somehow they're able to get me excited for Mox versus Omega, you know, and Mox, they could do the whole "you're washed up" thing, right? You don't deserve the title, and that'll be cool. Okay, well, you just convinced me. Now I'm excited for that match. I'm excited for that match now. So, anyway.
I wanted to shout out the folks who hung out with us in the chat earlier: Muhammad, Pro Wrestling Joker, Switch, Daza, of course, who also fed us some good information.
Thank you. Yeah.
And at the very end, Aaron Lindsay as well. So we'll figure out a time and place when we come back for 84. We're also going to have to figure out the new rundown, because the shows are just done differently in 1984 compared to 89. So we'll test some stuff out. I'm sure I'll have the opportunity to bring back only in the Observer, which we didn't really have time for today. But I want to thank Draven.
Well, wait, before we go, I have a plug. I actually have a plug. I haven't even.
Oh, wait. Are you in?
So tomorrow on Christmas Day.
Okay.
Me and I'm looking for the address to his Twitch. Me and Big D, the infamous Big D, Geekdom 101. We're gonna celebrate the 10-year anniversary of K Fabulous Lucha Brothers with a watch along of the first show we ever covered on that podcast, which was my favorite show, the 1992 Royal Rumble. So tomorrow at 11 o'clock Pacific, go to Geekdom 101 Twitch, his Twitch, which would be Twitch TV/Big D Geekdom. And we'll be there watching the Royal Rumble, reminiscing on 10 years of the KLB. I'm sure I'll be clowning him in some way or another, and we're gonna have a good time.
Cool.
So my Christmas morning is set. We're gonna be rewatching the Royal Rumble. So anybody that wants to come along, just join us there.
And little did people know that part of what became this and other little things, other little irons in the fire, was also trying to get you and D back recording. So,
but you succeeded, because here we are.
Yeah, that came out of just our conversations about this. So, no, it's really cool. I'm glad that you guys were able to do that. And we're done here. We'll be back for 1984 in the next month or so. So for Draven, I am Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.
Happy holidays.